The sun went down behind the dark ocean. The sky turned a deep purple color. In the port town of Oakhaven, the lights began to shine. The town was noisy and busy. Sailors, merchants, and workers filled the streets. They walked to the taverns to drink and talk after a long day of work. Captain Elara Vance walked through the muddy street. She wore a long red coat and a black hat. A sword hung at her side. Her boots made a heavy sound on the wooden path. She did not look at the people. She had a goal. She walked to a large, old building called the Rusty Anchor. Elara pushed the heavy wooden door open. The air inside the tavern was hot and thick with smoke. It smelled of old beer and salt water. Many men and women sat at the tables. They laughed and shouted. When Elara walked in, some people stopped talking. They looked at her red coat. They knew she was a captain. She walked to the back of the room and sat at a small, dark table. A waiter brought her a glass of water and some bread. Elara did not eat immediately. She watched the door. She waited for someone. 10 minutes later, a man entered the tavern. He was short and thin. He wore dirty grey clothes. He looked very nervous. His eyes moved quickly around the room. He saw Elara in the corner and walked to her table. He sat down quickly. "Did you bring the gold?" The man whispered. His voice was low and shaking. Elara looked at him calmly. "I have the gold, Silas. Do you have the paper?" Silas looked over his shoulder. He was afraid. "Yes. But you must be quick. They are looking for me." "Who is looking for you?" Elara asked. "Blackwood." Silas said. The name made the air feel cold. Captain Blackwood was a dangerous man. Silas put his hand on the table. Under his hand was a piece of old, yellow paper. Elara put a small bag of gold coins on the table. Silas took the bag immediately. He stood up. "Good luck, Captain." Silas said. "You will need it." He turned and ran out of the tavern. Elara was alone again. She opened the folded yellow paper. It was a map. It showed the ocean and some islands. But the paper was torn. The edge was rough. It was only half of a map. Elara smiled. It was the first clue to the golden anchor. She finished her water and stood up. The adventure was beginning. Elara sat alone at the dark table. She did not leave the tavern immediately. She wanted to look at her prize. She carefully unfolded the yellow paper again. The light from the candles on the wall was dim, but she could see the ink clearly. The paper was very old parchment. It felt dry and brittle in her fingers. Elara handled it with great care. If she pulled too hard, it might tear. On the paper, someone had drawn a coastline with black ink. There were drawings of small mountains and dangerous rocks in the water. Elara moved her finger across the map. She followed a dotted line. The line went from a large island to the open sea. Then, the line stopped. The paper ended there. The edge was ripped. It was a jagged tear. Only half. She whispered to herself. But it is the important half. She looked closer at the bottom of the page. There was a name written in very small letters. It said, Serpent's Rock. Elara's heart beat faster. Every sailor knew the stories about Serpent's Rock. It was a dangerous place far to the south. Many ships sank there because of the hidden stones under the water. If the treasure was near Serpent's Rock, the journey would be very difficult. She folded the map carefully. She opened her red coat and put the paper into a hidden pocket near her chest. It was safe there. She put her hand on the handle of her sword and stood up. Elara walked out of the rusty anchor. The night air was cold and salty. It felt good after the smoke inside the tavern. The street was quieter now. Most people were inside. The moon was high in the sky. painting the cobblestones with silver light. She began to walk toward the docks. Her ship, the Silver Falcon, was there. But then, she stopped. She had a strange feeling. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. It was a feeling she knew well. Someone was watching her. Elara did not turn around quickly. She was a professional. She continued to walk, but she listened carefully. Behind her, she heard footsteps. They were soft, but they were there. When she stopped, the footsteps stopped. When she walked, they started again. She turned a corner and walked faster. She needed to get to her ship. Her crew was there. She was safe with her crew. The map was a heavy weight in her pocket. Silas was right. Captain Blackwood was already looking for it. The race for the golden anchor had started, and she was in danger. Elara walked quickly along the wooden dock. The smell of the ocean was strong here. In front of her, the tall masts of the Silver Falcon rose into the night sky. The ship was beautiful. It was not the biggest ship in the port, but it was the fastest. The wood was polished, and the sails were tied tight against the yards. She climbed up the gangplank to the main deck. A large man stood near the wheel. This was Jax, her quartermaster. Jax was tall and very strong. He had a bald head and a thick black beard. He was Elara's best friend and the person she trusted most. When he saw her, he stopped cleaning his pistol. "Captain," Jax said. His voice was deep and rough. "You are back late." Elara nodded. She stood next to him and looked out at the dark water. "I had important business, Jax. But it was successful." She tapped the pocket of her red coat gently. "I have the paper." Jax's eyes opened wide. He stepped closer. "The map. You really found it?" "Yes." Elara whispered. "But we have a problem. Someone followed me from the tavern. I do not think we are safe here tonight." Jax frowned. He looked at the dark town with suspicion. "Blackwood?" "I think so." Elara replied. "We must prepare the ship immediately. Is the crew ready?" "Most of them are sleeping below deck." Jax said. "But I can wake them up if you give the order." "Let them sleep for now." Elara decided. "We have a lot of work tomorrow. We need energy. Where is old Tom?" "He is in the galley." Jax answered. "He never sleeps." Elara walked down the narrow stairs to the lower deck. She went into the galley, the ship's kitchen. It was warm inside and smelled of spices. A short man with messy white hair was stirring a large pot. This was old Tom, the ship's cook. He made the best stew in the ocean, and he took care of the crew like a father. "Captain." Tom smiled when he saw her. "Do you want some soup?" "It is fish soup. Very hot." "No thank you, Tom," Elara said, leaning against the doorframe. "I need to know about our supplies. Do we have enough food for a long trip? We might be at sea for weeks." Tom stopped stirring. He looked serious. "We have plenty of dried meat and hard biscuits. But we need more fresh water. And we are low on vegetables. If we go far, the men will get sick without fruit." "Okay," Elara said. "Tomorrow morning, as soon as the sun rises, you and 2 men must go to the market. Buy everything we need. Buy lemons and oranges too. We leave at high tide." Tom nodded. "Aye, Captain. I will do it." Elara left the warm kitchen and went to her private cabin at the back of the ship. She was tired, but she felt better. She had her ship, and she had her crew. Jax was strong, and Tom was loyal. They were a good team, but she knew the next few days would be hard. She took off her heavy boots and sat on her bed. She needed to rest before the trouble started. The next morning, the port of Oakhaven was bright and noisy. Seagulls flew in the blue sky. The air was cool. On the dock, the crew of the Silver Falcon worked hard. They carried heavy barrels of water and boxes of fresh fruit onto the ship. Captain Elara stood on the quarterdeck. She watched the work. She drank a cup of hot coffee. Everything looked good. Old Tom was shouting orders to the sailors, making sure the vegetables were safe. Jax was checking the ropes on the main mast. Suddenly, the noise on the dock changed. The workers stopped talking. The crowd of people moved to the sides, making a wide path. A man walked through the crowd. He walked slowly and with confidence. He wore a long coat made of expensive black velvet. He had silver buttons and a hat with a large feather. It was Captain Blackwood. Elara's hand went to her sword. She did not draw it. But she was ready. Blackwood stopped at the bottom of the gangplank. He looked up at Elara and smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. He had a thin scar on his left cheek. "Good morning, Captain Vance," Blackwood said. His voice was smooth, like silk. "It is a beautiful day for sailing, isn't it?" Elara walked down to the main deck to be closer to him. She did not invite him onto her ship. "What do you want, Blackwood?" she asked sharply. "I only want to say hello," Blackwood replied. He inspected his fingernails. "And I heard a rumor. I heard you bought something last night. A piece of paper. From a nervous little man named Silas." Elara's face did not change. She stayed calm. "I buy many things. Maps, food, rope. It is none of your business." Blackwood laughed softly. "Oh, Elara, you are always so serious. Listen to me. That map is dangerous. It leads to death, not gold. Give it to me. I will pay you double what you paid Silas." "The map is not for sale," Elara said firmly. Blackwood's smile disappeared. His eyes became hard and dark. "That is a mistake. The ocean is a very big place. Accidents happen. Ships sink. Captains disappear." He looked at the Silver Falcon with greedy eyes. "Be careful, Elara. If you sail south, you will see me again. And next time, I will not be so polite." He turned around and walked away. The crowd moved quickly to let him pass. Elara watched him go. She saw 3 of his men standing in the shadows of a warehouse. They were watching her ship. Jax walked up to Elara. He looked worried. "He knows, Captain." "Yes," Elara said. "He knows. We must finish loading. Hurry. We need to leave before sunset." The loading took longer than Elara planned. The sun went down, and the moon rose high above the harbor. The town of Oakhaven was quiet now. On the Silver Falcon, the crew was asleep. They needed to rest before the journey at sunrise. Elara was awake in her cabin. She sat at her desk. A single candle burned on the wood. The map lay in front of her. She studied the ink lines and the strange symbols. She tried to memorize the shape of the coastline. Suddenly, she heard a noise. It came from the large glass window behind her. The window looked out over the dark water. Elara froze. She stopped breathing and listened. Then, she heard a soft scratch against the wood. Without hesitation, Elara blew out the candle. The room went pitch black. A second later, the glass shattered. The sound of breaking glass was loud in the quiet night. 2 dark shapes jumped into the room from the outside. They were men dressed in black clothes. They held long knives in their hands. The moonlight from the window showed the shine of the metal blades. "She is in here," one man whispered. "Find the map." Elara stood silently in the corner. She pulled her sword from its sheath. The metal made a soft ringing sound. The men turned toward the noise. "Who are you?" Elara asked. Her voice was cold and hard. "We are just friends," the second man said. He lunged forward with his knife. Elara moved quickly to the left. The knife cut the air where she was standing a moment ago. She swung her sword. It hit the man's arm. He dropped his knife and cried out in pain. The first man attacked now. He was big and heavy. He tried to grab Elara's neck. Elara kicked a heavy wooden chair at him. The man stumbled over the chair and fell against the desk. "Jax!" Elara shouted loudly. "To my cabin. Now!" The door to the cabin burst open. Jax stood there with a lantern in one hand and a pistol in the other. The light filled the room. The two thieves saw the giant quartermaster and realized they could not win. They turned and ran back to the broken window. Without looking back, they jumped out. They hit the water below and swam away into the darkness. Jax ran to the window and looked out. But the men were gone. He looked at Elara. She was breathing hard. But she was not hurt. "Are you okay, Captain?" Jax asked. "I am fine," Elara said. She picked up the map from the floor. "They came for this. Blackwood does not want to wait." Jax looked at the broken window. "We cannot stay here, Elara. Not even for one more night." Elara nodded. She put her sword away. "You are right. Wake the crew, Jax. We leave now." The peaceful silence of the night ended abruptly. Jax ran down to the crew's quarters. He banged his fist on the wooden walls. "Wake up. Everyone up. Hands on deck," he shouted. His voice was loud like thunder in the small space. The sailors woke up slowly. They were confused and sleepy. Some rubbed their eyes. Others looked for their boots in the dark. "Is it morning?" one sailor asked, yawning. "No," Jack said seriously. "It is the middle of the night." But the captain gave an order. "We sail now." Within 5 minutes, 20 men and women stood on the main deck. The air was cold, and the wind blew across the harbor. They looked at the broken window of the captain's cabin. They saw the pieces of glass on the deck. They whispered to each other. They knew something bad happened. Captain Elara walked out of her cabin. She had cleaned the cut on her hand, but she still looked fierce. She stood on the quarterdeck and looked down at her crew. The moonlight shined on her face. "Listen to me," Elara said. The crew stopped whispering. 10 minutes ago, 2 men attacked me in my room. They worked for Captain Blackwood. They wanted our map. They failed. But Blackwood is close. We cannot stay in Oak Haven. It is not safe." The crew looked angry. They were loyal to Elara. They did not like spies and thieves. "What are your orders, Captain?" asked old Tom, who had come up from the kitchen. "Prepare the ship for departure," Elara commanded. "We leave immediately. Do not use the lanterns. We must be invisible. We will sail out in the darkness." The crew moved fast. They knew their jobs well. They were professional sailors. Jax directed the strongest men to the front of the ship. "Heave! Heave!" he whispered loudly. They pushed the heavy bars of the capstan to pull up the anchor. The wet, heavy chain came up from the water, link by link. It made a grinding sound, but the noise of the wind covered it. Other sailors climbed up the tall masts. They were like shadows against the starry sky. They untied the ropes that held the sails. The canvas sails fell down and caught the wind. The white cloth filled with air. Elara went back to her cabin for a moment. Jax was there, nailing a piece of wood over the broken window. "Is the ship ready?" Elara asked. "The anchor is up. Jack said, hitting the last nail. "The wind is coming from the west. It is a good wind for leaving." "Good," Elara said. She walked to the ship's wheel. She put her hands on the smooth wood. She felt the ship come alive under her feet. The Silver Falcon was ready to fly. The Silver Falcon moved slowly away from the wooden dock. The water between the ship and the land became wider. The only sounds were the wind in the sails and the gentle splash of water against the wooden hull. The ship was like a ghost in the night. There were no lights on the deck. The lanterns were dark. Captain Elara stood at the wheel. Her eyes were sharp. She looked into the darkness ahead. Navigating the harbor at night was difficult. There were other ships anchored in the water, and there were shallow sandbanks. One mistake could crash the ship. "Watch the starboard side," Elara whispered to Jax. "Aye, Captain." Jax replied softly. He leaned over the railing, looking at the dark water. They sailed past sleeping fishing boats. Then, they approached a large, dark shape. It was a massive ship with black sails. It looked like a monster sleeping on the water. Elara recognized it immediately. It was the Obsidian, Captain Blackwood's ship. The crew of the Silver Falcon held their breath. They were very close to the enemy. If one of Blackwood's guards looked up, he would see them. Elara steered the ship carefully. She kept the Silver Falcon in the shadow of the larger ship. They passed silently. No one shouted. They were safe. 10 minutes later, they reached the mouth of the harbor. The calm water of the port changed. The waves became bigger and stronger. The smell of the air changed from smoke and fish to pure, clean salt. They were in the open ocean now. "Full sail," Elara ordered. Her voice was louder now because they were safe from the town. The crew climbed the rigging quickly. They untied the rest of the sails. The ship picked up speed. It cut through the waves like a knife. Behind them, the sky began to change color. The darkness turned to gray, and then to a soft pink. The sun was rising. A golden light spread across the horizon. It touched the tops of the waves and made them sparkle. Elara looked back at Oakhaven one last time. The town was just a small speck in the distance. The lighthouse was a tiny white stick. She felt a mix of emotions. She was leaving her home, but she was free. "Course, Captain?" The navigator, a woman named Mara, asked. She stood next to Elara with a compass. Elara touched the pocket where the map was hidden. "South by southeast, Mara. We are going to the warm waters." "South by southeast," Mara repeated. She adjusted the compass. The sun rose fully above the water. It was a new day. The chase for the golden anchor had officially begun. Elara took a deep breath of the fresh morning air and smiled. 3 days passed since the Silver Falcon left Oakhaven. The land was gone. Now, there was only the blue ocean. In every direction, the water met the sky at the horizon. The world was a circle of blue and white. Life on the ship followed a strict routine. The ship's bell rang early in the morning, before the sun was fully up. The sailors woke up from their hammocks on the lower deck. They ate a quick breakfast of hard biscuits and hot coffee. Then, the work began. The first job was always the same. They had to clean the deck. The wooden floor of the ship was important. If it was dirty, it was slippery and dangerous. The sailors used heavy stones and sand to scrub the wood. They poured buckets of salt water over the planks. They worked in a line, moving backward across the deck. Jax walked behind them. He watched their work closely. "Scrub harder," he shouted. "This ship must be cleaner than the king's palace." The men and women laughed, but they worked hard. Their muscles were strong from years of sailing. They did not complain. They knew that a clean ship was a fast ship. After the cleaning, there were other jobs. The salt water and the sun damaged the ship every day. Ropes needed repair. Sails needed sewing. The carpenter, a quiet man named Elias, fixed a broken railing. He worked slowly and carefully with his tools. At midday, the sun was high and hot. The heat reflected off the water. The air was heavy. Old Tom rang the bell for lunch. The crew sat in the shade of the sails. They ate bowls of stew. Today, the stew had fresh vegetables from Oak Haven. It was a special treat. Elara ate her lunch on the quarterdeck. She watched her crew. They were a good group. They told stories and made jokes. They trusted each other. In a fight, this trust was more important than guns or swords. In the afternoon, the wind changed slightly. The navigator, Mara, checked her charts. She measured the position of the sun. "We are on the right path, Captain," she said. "We are making good time." Elara nodded. "Good work, Mara. Keep us steady." As the evening approached, the work stopped. The sun began to set. It was a giant orange ball sinking into the water. The ocean turned from blue to gold, and then to dark gray. The first shift of the night watch began. Elara stayed on deck for a while. It was the most peaceful time of the day. The ship rocked gently. The stars began to appear one by one. But as Elara looked at the western horizon, she frowned. The clouds there were different. They were low and dark. They looked like bruises on the sky. The peaceful days were ending. The ocean was waking up. The change happened very fast. The dark clouds that Elara saw on the horizon moved quickly toward the ship. They covered the moon and the stars. The sky turned a deep, angry black. The air became cold and sharp. "All hands on deck!" Elara shouted. Her voice cut through the sound of the wind. "Lower the sails. Now!" The crew ran to their positions. They were not smiling anymore. This was serious. The wind hit the sails with great force. The Silver Falcon leaned dangerously to the right. The wood of the ship groaned under the pressure. Jack stood in the middle of the deck. Rain began to fall. It was heavy and cold. It hit the sailors' faces like small stones. The deck became wet and very slippery. "Pull! Pull!" Jax yelled as the men tried to pull the heavy ropes to close the sails. Suddenly, a flash of lightning lit up the sky. A second later, a loud clap of thunder shook the air. The storm was directly on top of them. The waves grew larger. They were like moving walls of dark water. One giant wave crashed over the side of the ship. Cold, salty water rushed across the deck. It knocked over barrels and boxes. A young sailor slipped and fell. Jax grabbed his arm just before the water washed him away. "Hold on to something!" Elara screamed from the quarterdeck. She held the ship's wheel with both hands. The wheel fought against her. The water pushed the rudder hard to the left, then to the right. Elara's arms burned with pain, but she did not let go. If she lost control, the waves would turn the ship over. Above them, the wind was too strong for the mainsail. The crew tried to tie it down, but the wet rope was difficult to hold. Suddenly, there was a loud tearing sound. The thick canvas of the sail ripped down the middle. "The sail is broken!" Mara shouted. She pointed up. The torn sail flapped wildly in the wind. It hit the wooden mast. If it continued, it could break the mast. "We have to cut it," Elara ordered. "Jax, cut the line." Jax nodded. He took a knife from his belt. The ship pitched up and down violently. Climbing the rigging now was suicide. But Jax did not hesitate. He climbed up the wet, shaking ropes. The wind tried to blow him off. He reached the top and slashed the rope with his knife. The torn sail flew away into the dark night. The ship stopped shaking so much, They were safe for a moment, but the storm raged on. The storm ended just before sunrise. The dark clouds moved away to the east, and the sky turned a pale, soft blue. The ocean, which was a monster only a few hours ago, was now calm and flat like a mirror. Captain Elara stepped out of her cabin. She walked onto the main deck. The ship looked like a battlefield. Ropes were tangled in big knots on the floor. Wooden barrels were overturned, and apples rolled back and forth with the gentle movement of the ship. The deck was wet and covered in seaweed. But the worst damage was above. Elara looked up at the main mast. The tall, thick pole of wood that held the biggest sails had a long, ugly crack. It went from the middle of the mast up to the top. "Report," Elara said. Her voice was calm, but she was worried. Jax walked over. He looked very tired. His eyes were red, and his clothes were soaked with salt water. "The crew is tired, Captain. We have many bruises and cuts, but no one is seriously hurt. We were lucky." "And the ship?" Elara asked, pointing at the cracked mast. Elias, the carpenter, joined them. He had a bag of tools in his hand. He looked up at the damage and frowned. He touched the wood of the mast. "It is bad," Elias said honestly. "The wood is split. If we put full sails up now, the wind will snap the mast in two. The whole thing will fall down." "Can you fix it?" Elara asked. "I can reinforce it," Elias explained. "I have heavy iron bands in the storage. We can wrap the iron around the wood to hold it together. It will be strong, but not as strong as before. We must be careful with the speed." "How long will it take?" "Maybe 2 days," Elias said. "It is difficult work." Elara shook her head. "We do not have 2 days. Blackwood is chasing us. If we stop, he will catch us. You have until sunset." Elias looked at the sun. He nodded slowly. "Then I need help. Give me the strongest men." The recovery work began immediately. There was no time for sleep. The sailors who were not too tired helped Elias. They brought the heavy iron bands up from the cargo hold. They used hammers to shape the metal. The sound of metal hitting metal rang out across the quiet water. Elara worked too. She helped untangle the ropes and clean the deck. She wanted her crew to see that she was working with them. Old Tom brought buckets of fresh water and dried meat to the workers. They ate while they worked. The sun beat down on them. It was hot and humid. Sweat ran down their faces. But they did not stop. They lifted the heavy iron bands and secured them around the crack. They hammered large nails into the wood to hold the iron in place. By the time the sun began to set, the mast looked like it wore a metal corset. It was ugly, but it felt solid. "It is done," Elias said, wiping his forehead. "It will hold." "Raise the spare sail," Elara ordered. "We need to make up for lost time." The white canvas went up. The wind caught it, and the Silver Falcon began to move forward again. They were tired and the ship was scarred, but they were still in the race. The excitement of the storm and the hard work of the repairs were gone. Now, a new problem arrived. It was silence. For 2 days, the wind blew strong and steady. But on the third morning, the wind died completely. The huge white sails of the Silver Falcon hung loose and heavy from the yards. They did not move. The flags on top of the masts did not wave. They just hung down like dead leaves. The ocean changed too. It was no longer a moving, living thing. It became flat and smooth like a giant sheet of blue glass. There were no waves. The ship sat in the water without moving forward. It only drifted very slowly with the deep ocean currents. The sun was the enemy now. It rose high in the sky and burned down on the deck. There were no clouds to hide it. The heat was terrible. The pitch, the black glue between the wooden planks, became soft and sticky. The air was thick and hard to breathe. Captain Elara stood at the rail. She looked at the water. She threw a small piece of wood into the ocean. She watched it. After 5 minutes, the piece of wood was still next to the ship. They were not moving at all. "We are stuck," Elara said quietly. Jack stood next to her. He wiped sweat from his bald head with a rag. Captain. It is the calm. The doldrums. We can do nothing but wait. Waiting is dangerous." Elara replied. She looked back toward the north. The horizon was empty, but she knew Blackwood was out there. If Blackwood has wind and we do not, he will catch us. He is in the same ocean. Jax reasoned. If there is no wind here, there is probably no wind there. On the main deck, the crew sat in the shadows. It was too hot to work. They repaired clothes or carved small figures out of wood. They spoke in low voices. The silence of the ocean made everyone speak quietly. Old Tom came up from the galley. "Captain," he said, "it is too hot to cook. A fire in the kitchen will roast us all. We will eat cold meat and biscuits today." "That is fine, Tom," Elara said. "But watch the water barrels. In this heat, the men are thirsty. They drink more than usual." Tom nodded seriously. "I locked the water supply. I give rations only." The day passed very slowly. The sun moved across the sky like a slow turtle. Elara paced back and forth on the quarterdeck. She wanted to scream at the sky. She wanted to command the wind to blow. But she was powerless. A captain can control a ship, and a captain can command a crew. But no captain can command the weather. As the sun set, the sky turned a beautiful mix of orange and purple. The reflection on the flat water was perfect. It was beautiful, but it felt like a prison. They were trapped in the middle of nowhere. The next morning brought no change. The sun was still a hot, angry eye in the sky. The water was still flat. The crew of the Silver Falcon was bored and irritable. They sat in the shade, cleaning their knives or playing card games for tobacco. Suddenly, a sailor named Griggs pointed at the sky. "Look!" he shouted. "Something is coming." Everyone looked up. Usually, the only things in the sky were clouds or the sun. But today, a small dark shape fell toward the ship. It was not falling like a stone. It was flying, but it flew erratically. It looked very tired. The creature landed on the wooden railing near the wheel. It was a bird, but not a seagull. Seagulls were white and gray and noisy. This bird was beautiful and strange. It had bright blue feathers on its wings and a chest of emerald green. Its tail was long and yellow. The crew slowly gathered around the quarterdeck. They had never seen a bird like this before. They stood quietly, afraid to scare it away. "What is it?" Griggs asked. "Is it good luck or bad luck?" "It is a tropical bird," Old Tom whispered. He wiped his hands on his apron. "These birds live on the islands far to the south. The Golden Islands. It is very far from home." Elara said softly. She stepped closer to the bird. The bird did not fly away. It sat on the wood, breathing fast. Its small chest moved up and down quickly. Its beak was open. "It is thirsty," Elara realized. "Tom, bring a small cup of water." Tom ran to the galley and came back with a tin cup. Elara took it. She moved her hand very slowly. She did not want to frighten the little traveler. She placed the cup on the railing next to the bird. The bird looked at Elara with black, intelligent eyes. It hopped forward. It dipped its beak into the water and drank deep. It drank again and again. It was lost at sea. Jack said. Just like us. But it found us. Elara replied. That means we are on a path. After the bird drank, it seemed to get its energy back. It shook its feathers. Then, it looked at the horizon. It let out a sharp, high cry. It opened its colorful wings and took off. It did not fly in a circle. It flew straight. It flew directly south by southeast. Look at that. Elara said, pointing. It knows where the land is. But we cannot follow it. Jax grumbled. We have no wind. As he spoke, a small ripple appeared on the water. Then another. The heavy sails made a soft noise. The canvas moved. A gentle breeze touched Elara's face. It came from the north, pushing them south. The wind. Elara shouted. The wind is back. Hands to stations. The crew cheered. The bird was a messenger. The ocean was waking up, and the silver falcon could fly again. The wind filled the sails, and the silver falcon moved through the water again. This was good news. But the sun was still a problem. It was relentless. The heat during the day was oppressive, and even the nights were warm. 2 days after the wind returned, old Tom climbed up to the quarterdeck. He did not look happy. He held a wooden ladle in his hand. His face was pale and sweaty. Captain, Tom said quietly, we have a problem below. Elara looked away from the horizon. Is it the food? No, Captain. It is the water. Tom said. He looked down at his feet. We had 5 barrels left. I opened a new one this morning. It smells bad. It is green inside. Something grew in the heat. Elara's stomach turned. Bad water was a sailor's worst nightmare. Show me. She ordered. They went down to the storage deck. It was dark and hot down there. The smell was terrible. It smelled like a swamp, not like clean water. Tom pointed to the open barrel. The water inside was thick and cloudy. It was poison. Dump it. Elara said. If the men drink this, they will die of fever. That leaves us with only 2 good barrels. Tom whispered. For 20 people. In this heat. We must ration it. Elara decided. Half a cup in the morning. Half a cup at night. No more. When the crew heard the news, the mood on the ship changed instantly. The excitement of the wind disappeared. Fear took its place. Thirst was a slow and painful enemy. By the afternoon, the effects were visible. The sailors worked slower. Their lips were dry and cracked. Their skin was red from the sun. They looked at the locked water barrel with hungry eyes. Near the main mast, 2 sailors, Griggs and a large man named Ben, started arguing. You took an extra sip. Griggs shouted. His voice was scratchy. You are a liar. Ben shouted back. He pushed Griggs. Griggs fell onto the hard deck. Ben raised his fist to hit him again. Suddenly, a strong hand grabbed Ben's arm. It was Jax. Enough. Jax growled. He threw Ben back. We are a crew. We do not fight each other. We fight the ocean. Elara stood on the deck. She looked at her thirsty, tired crew. She knew they were suffering. She felt the thirst in her own throat too. It felt like sand. Listen to me, she said. Her voice was raspy but strong. I know you are thirsty. I am thirsty too. But we are close. The bird showed us the way. We will find land soon. Until then, we must be strong. Do not let the thirst make you crazy. The men nodded slowly. They returned to their posts. But the tension remained. The ship sailed on, but it felt like a race against time. They needed water, and they needed it fast. The sun rose for the fourth day. It was a cruel morning. The light was too bright, and the heat began immediately. On the deck of the Silver Falcon, it was very quiet. The sailors did not talk. Talking made their throats dry. They moved slowly, like old people. Their lips were white and cracked. Their eyes were red. Captain Elara sat near the wheel. She felt dizzy. Her head hurt from the dehydration. She looked at Jax. The big quartermaster looked thin. His skin was grey. He held the wheel, but his hands shook slightly. "We need rain," Elara whispered. Her voice was like dry leaves. "The sky is clear," Jax replied. He did not look up. It hurt to look at the blue sky. High above them, in the crow's nest at the top of the main mast, a young sailor named Pip was on watch. It was the worst job today. The sun was hottest up there. Suddenly, a shout came down from the sky. It was weak, but it was loud enough. "Land! Land ho!" Elara stood up quickly. The sudden movement made her dizzy, and she grabbed the railing to stay standing. The crew on the deck lifted their heads. "Is he dreaming?" one sailor asked. "Is it a trick of the sun?" "Give me the glass," Elara ordered. She took the telescope from its wooden box. Her hands trembled as she lifted it to her eye. She looked south, in the direction Pip pointed. At first, she saw only the endless blue ocean. Then, she adjusted the focus. There, on the edge of the world, was a small smudge of green. It was not a cloud. It was not a wave. It was solid. It was an island. "It is real," Elara shouted. "It is land. All hands to stations." The change in the crew was instant. The promise of water gave them new energy. Men who were lying on the deck stood up. They ran to the ropes. "Trim the sails," Jax roared. His voice was strong again. "Steer for the green." The ship turned slightly. The wind pushed them toward the island. As they got closer, the smudge became clearer. Elara could see white sand beaches. She saw tall palm trees swaying in the wind. And in the center of the island, there was a high, rocky hill. "Trees mean rain," Old Tom said, smiling. "And rain means fresh water." "And food," added Griggs. "Coconuts. Bananas." The ship cut through the water. The air changed. The salty smell of the ocean mixed with a new smell. It was the smell of wet earth and flowers. To the thirsty sailors, it was the best perfume in the world. "Drop the anchor when we are close," Elara commanded. "Prepare the longboats. We go ashore immediately." They were saved. The island was a green jewel in the blue sea. But as Elara looked at the thick jungle, she felt a small worry. Uninhabited islands were often home to dangerous things. But they had no choice. They needed water. The wooden longboat cut through the shallow turquoise water. As soon as the bottom of the boat touched the white sand, the sailors jumped out. The water was warm and reached their knees. They pulled the boat up onto the dry beach. They were weak and dizzy, but the smell of the damp earth gave them strength. They did not stop to look at the beautiful flowers or the tall palm trees. They had one goal: water. Into the trees, Jax ordered. He carried 2 empty buckets. Elara led the way. She pushed aside large green leaves. The jungle was thick and dark. It was much cooler here than on the open ocean. The air was full of the sounds of insects and birds. After walking for 10 minutes, they heard it. It was a beautiful sound. It was the sound of running water. "There!" shouted Pip. He ran forward. Through the trees, they saw a small stream. The water came down from the rocky hill in the center of the island. It was clear and sparkling. The crew fell to their knees on the muddy bank. They did not use cups. They put their faces directly into the water. They drank and drank. The water was cold and sweet. It washed away the salt and the dust from their throats. It felt like life itself returning to their bodies. Elara drank too. She splashed the cool water on her hot face and neck. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The headache from the dehydration began to fade. "Fill the barrels," Elara said after a few minutes. "Drink slowly, or you will get sick." The crew obeyed. They filled the wooden kegs and buckets they brought from the ship, while the men carried the water back to the beach. Old Tom and 3 others went to find food. They returned quickly. Their arms were full. They had bunches of yellow bananas and large, green coconuts. Tom used his knife to open the coconuts. He gave the milk to the weakest sailors. "This is a paradise," Grigg said, eating a banana. "Maybe we should stay here forever." Jax laughed. "And let the ship rot." "No. We are sailors. We belong on the sea." They spent the afternoon working. They made many trips between the fresh stream and the longboat. They rolled the heavy barrels down the beach. It was hard work, but they did not complain. They were happy to have water. By sunset, the Silver Falcon was restocked. The water barrels were full. The fruit nets were heavy. The crew sat on the beach for a short rest before returning to the ship. They watched the sun go down. Elara stood apart from them. She looked out at the ocean. She scanned the horizon with her telescope. The sea was empty, but she felt a knot in her stomach. "We are too comfortable," she whispered to herself. "It is quiet. Too quiet." She turned to Jax. "Load the boat. We go back to the ship now. We leave at first light." The sun disappeared completely. The beach was now gray and dark. The only light came from the moon and the white foam of the waves. The crew of the Silver Falcon finished their work. They were tired, but they felt strong again. The barrels of water were safely in the longboat. "Push the boat into the water," Jax ordered. He stood at the back of the boat, ready to push. 1, 2, heave. The heavy wooden boat scraped against the sand. It moved slowly toward the ocean. Suddenly, a bright light appeared at the edge of the jungle. It was not the moon. It was fire. A torch burned brightly in the darkness. Then, a second torch appeared. Then a third. Elara froze. Her hand went to her sword. "Stop!" she hissed. From the shadows of the palm trees, a line of men walked onto the beach. There were at least 15 of them. They wore dark clothes and red scarves. They held swords and pistols. They stood between Elara's crew and the safety of the jungle. A man walked to the front of the line. He held a torch high. The firelight showed his face. He had a long, twisted nose and missing teeth. He smiled, but it was an ugly smile. "Good evening," the man said. His voice was like grinding stones. "You did the hard work for us. Thank you for the water." "Blackwood's men," Jax growled. He pulled his pistol from his belt. "Where is your captain?" Elara asked loudly. She stood in front of her crew. She was calm, but her heart beat very fast. "Captain Blackwood is on his ship," the man with the twisted nose said. He pointed out to sea. "He is waiting for you to surrender. Or, he is waiting for us to kill you." The enemy sailors laughed. They stepped closer. They blocked the path to the east and the west. The ocean was behind Elara, but the longboat was heavy and slow. They could not launch it before the enemy attacked. We do not surrender. Elara said. That is a shame. The man said. He pulled out a long, curved sword. Get them. Take the map from the woman. The enemy charged. They ran across the sand, shouting, Defend yourselves. Elara shouted to her crew. The peaceful beach became a battlefield. The sound of steel hitting steel rang out. Jax fired his pistol, and one of the attackers fell. But there were too many of them. Blackwood's men were fresh and rested. Elara's crew was tired from the long day of work. Elara fought two men at once. She parried a blow from the left and kicked the man on the right. But she saw more torches coming from the trees. More enemies were arriving. We cannot win here. Elara realized. They will kill us all on the sand. She looked at the thick jungle behind the enemy line. It was dark and dangerous, but it was their only chance. Retreat. Elara screamed. Into the jungle. Run. The jungle was a wall of black leaves and twisted vines. Elara ran straight into it. She did not look back. She heard the heavy boots of her crew behind her. They breathed hard as they ran. Keep moving. Elara whispered fiercely. Do not stop. The ground was uneven. Large roots stuck out of the earth like snakes. It was easy to trip in the darkness. Elara held her hands in front of her face to protect her eyes from the sharp branches. The jungle was thick and hot. The air was heavy with humidity. Behind them, the orange light of the torches cut through the trees. The light moved erratically. The enemy sailors were close. There they are. I see movement. A man shouted from behind. Spread out. Another voice yelled. Do not let them escape. Elara turned sharp left. She saw a small path made by animals. This way. She signaled to Jax. Jax grabbed old Tom's arm. The cook was older and slower than the others. Come on, Tom. Jax urged. Run or die. They ran up a steep hill. The mud was slippery. Elara grabbed a thick vine to pull herself up. Her boots slid on the wet earth. She reached the top and looked down. The torches were below them now. The enemy was confused by the thick vegetation. Down. Elara ordered. The crew threw themselves onto the ground. They hid behind a large fallen tree. The wood was rotten and covered in moss. They pressed their bodies into the soft dirt. They tried to be invisible. The enemy soldiers reached the bottom of the hill. They stopped. They held their torches high, looking for tracks. Where did they go? One man asked. He was very close. Elara could hear the fabric of his coat move. They went up the hill. Another man said, I heard a branch break. No. A third voice argued. It is too steep. They went along the river. Follow the water. The group of enemies argued for a moment. Then, they turned and ran toward the sound of the stream. The orange lights moved away. The sound of their shouting became quieter and quieter. Finally, the jungle was dark and silent again. Elara let out a long breath. She wiped the sweat and dirt from her forehead. Her heart beat against her ribs like a hammer. Are they gone? Whispered young Pip. He was shaking with fear. For now. Elara said quietly. She sat up. But they are between us and the beach. We cannot go back to the boat the same way. We are trapped on the island. Jax said grimly. And the Silver Falcon is alone in the bay. We must circle around. Elara decided. We will cross the hill and go down the other side. It will take all night. But we have to reach the ship before Blackwood takes it. She stood up. Her legs were tired. but her will was strong. "Move quietly. If you break a stick, you kill us all." The journey through the jungle was difficult and slow. Captain Elara and her crew walked for hours. They climbed over wet rocks and pushed through thick vines. The insects bit their skin, and the thorns tore their clothes. But they did not stop. They knew that sunrise would bring danger. Finally, the trees began to thin. The smell of the ocean became strong again. Elara pushed aside a large palm leaf and looked out. They were on a rocky cliff. Below them was a small, quiet bay. In the center of the bay, the silver falcon floated on the dark water. It looked peaceful. There were no lights on the deck. "She is safe," Jax whispered. He sounded relieved. "But look at the main beach," Elara said, pointing to the left. Far away, down the coast, they could see the orange fires of Blackwood's men. The enemy was still waiting near the first landing spot. They were guarding the longboat and the water barrels. "We lost the water," Old Tom said sadly. "And we lost the boat." "We are alive," Elara corrected him. "That is more important. Now, we must get to the ship before they see us." "How?" asked Pip. "We cannot fly. We swim," Elara said. She took off her heavy red coat and her boots. She tied her sword to her back. "The water is calm. It is not far." The crew looked at the black water. They were tired, but they nodded. They followed Elara down the steep rocks to the edge of the sea. One by one, they slid into the ocean. The water was cold. Elara shivered, but she started to swim. She moved her arms quietly. She did not want to make a splash. The moon was behind a cloud, so they were hidden in the shadows. They swam for 20 minutes. It was exhausting work. Finally, Elara touched the wooden hull of the Silver Falcon. She grabbed the rough rope of the anchor chain. "Up," she whispered. They climbed the chain. It was slippery and hard to hold. Elara pulled herself over the railing and rolled onto the deck. She lay there for a moment, breathing hard. Water dripped from her clothes. Jax climbed up next, then Tom, then the rest of the crew. They were all safe. "Do not rest yet," Elara ordered quietly. She stood up. "Blackwood's men will see us when we move. We must be fast. Raise the anchor. Open the sails." The crew worked with desperate energy. They pulled up the heavy anchor. The wet sails dropped down. Suddenly, a shout came from the beach. The enemy saw the movement of the sails. A gun fired from the shore. The bullet hit the water far from the ship. "They see us," Jax shouted. "Hard to starboard." The wind caught the sails. The ship leaned and turned. The Silver Falcon began to move away from the island. On the beach, the torches moved angrily. Men ran into the water, shouting. But it was too late. The pirate ship sailed into the deep, dark ocean, leaving the enemy behind. The danger of the island was far behind them. The Silver Falcon sailed smoothly on the open sea. The sun was rising, painting the sky with soft pink and orange colors. The crew was exhausted. They slept on the deck, wrapped in blankets. They were happy to be alive. Captain Elara did not sleep. She stood on the quarterdeck with Mara, the ship's navigator. Mara was a quiet woman with sharp green eyes and short, dark hair. She held the wheel steady. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, but she looked deep in thought. Elara looked at Mara. She noticed something strange. Since they found the map, Mara was different. She was more focused, more intense, and she knew the course before Elara told her. "Mara," Elara said softly, "you are steering south by southeast, but I did not give you that order yet." Mara froze. She did not look at Elara. She stared at the compass. "It is the best wind, Captain. Do not lie to me," Elara said. Her voice was stern but not angry. "You know where we are going, don't you?" Mara sighed. Her shoulders dropped. She finally looked at Elara. "Yes, Captain. I know about the golden anchor." "How?" Elara asked. "Only a few people know the legend is real." "My father," Mara whispered. "He was a navigator too. 20 years ago. He sailed with a captain named Fluent. They had a map. It was the complete map, not just a torn half." Elara stepped closer. "What happened to them?" "They found the region," Mara explained. "They found the dark waters and the fog. But they never found the treasure. The ship was destroyed. My father was the only survivor. He drifted at sea on a piece of wood for weeks." Mara looked out at the ocean. Her eyes were sad. When he came home, he was sick. His mind was broken. He spoke of giant waves and a ghost ship. But he also drew charts. He drew the stars he saw in that place. Before he died, he gave me his journal. Elara was silent. This was valuable information. "Do you have the journal?" "It is in my head," Mara said, tapping her forehead. "I memorized every page. I know the way, Captain. But I also know the dangers. My father said the ocean there is alive. It wants to keep the treasure." Elara looked at the map in her hand. Then she looked at her navigator. She realized that Mara was more important than the map itself. "Why did you join my crew?" Elara asked. "Because you are brave," Mara said simply. "And because I need to finish my father's journey. I need to prove he was not crazy." Elara nodded. She respected that. "Very well, Mara. You guide us. But warn me before the danger starts." Mara looked to the south. Her face became serious. "Then be ready, Captain. The first danger is coming soon. My father wrote about the White Wall, the fog that never ends." 2 days after Mara's confession, the weather changed again. The bright sun disappeared behind a thin layer of grey clouds. The air, which was warm and tropical, suddenly became cold. It was a wet, sticky cold that went through clothes and touched the skin. Elara stood on the deck. She buttoned her red coat tight against her neck. She looked ahead. On the horizon, there was a strange white line. It looked like a low cloud resting on the water, but it was too straight and too solid. "There it is," Mara said. She stood next to Elara. She did not look afraid, but she was very serious. "The White Wall." The crew stopped working. They gathered at the railing. They whispered to each other. Sailors did not like fog. In fog, you cannot see rocks. You cannot see other ships. You are blind. It looks unnatural. Jax muttered. He rubbed his beard nervously. "It looks like it is waiting for us. We must go through it," Elara said firmly. "Maintain course." The Silver Falcon sailed closer to the White Wall. As the ship entered the mist, the light faded. It was midday, but it looked like evening. The white fog swallowed the ship. First, the front of the ship disappeared. Then the main mast. Finally, the person standing 5 meters away became a grey shadow. The world was gone. There was no sky, no ocean, no horizon. There was only the ship and the white mist. Silence on deck. Elara ordered. "We need to listen." The fog muffled all sounds. The wind in the sails was quiet. The splash of the waves was soft. It felt like the ship was floating in a cloud, not on water. The air was very wet. Water dripped from the sails and the ropes. The deck became slippery. Mara stood at the wheel. She could not see the front of the ship. She could not see the sun to check her direction. She closed her eyes. She focused on the feel of the ship and the movement of the water below. Slow speed. Jax asked Elara. No. Mara answered for her. The current here is strong. If we go slow, the water will turn us around. We will get lost forever. We must keep speed. Elara trusted her navigator. Full sail. She commanded. Keep a sharp lookout. If you see a shadow, shout immediately. The crew stood at the edges of the ship. They peered into the thick white soup. Their eyes hurt from straining to see. They held their weapons tight. The fog made them feel isolated and small. As the hours passed, the fog became thicker. It was hard to tell if it was day or night. Time seemed to stop. I don't like this. A sailor whispered near the main mast. I feel like something is watching us. Elara felt it too. The hair on her arms stood up. It was the same feeling she had in Oak Haven. They were not alone in the mist. The white fog did not leave. It stayed around the ship like a thick, wet blanket. On the Silver Falcon, time lost its meaning. Was it morning? Was it night? Nobody knew. The sun was invisible. The moon was gone. There was only the grey light and the cold water dripping from the rigging. The crew stood at their posts, but they were not looking at the ocean anymore. They were looking at each other. Their eyes were wide and frightened. The silence of the fog was heavy. But soon, the silence broke. Did you hear that? Whispered a sailor named Ben. He held a rope tight in his hands. He looked into the white emptiness. Hear what? Jax asked. He walked over to Ben. Jax walked heavily, trying to sound normal and strong. My mother. Ben said. His voice shook. She called my name. She said, Ben, come home. Jax frowned. Your mother is in Oak Haven, Ben. She is not here. It is the wind. There is no wind. Ben shouted. He pointed at the sails. They were still. It was her voice. Other sailors began to speak. Griggs claimed he heard the sound of a church bell from his village. Old Tom heard the sound of frying meat, even though the galley fire was cold. Captain Elara stood near the wheel. She felt the fear spreading through her crew like a sickness. Stay calm. She ordered. Your minds are tired. The lack of sight makes your ears play tricks on you. Mara, the navigator, stepped closer to Elara. She spoke softly so the crew could not hear. It is not a trick, Captain. It is the mist. My father wrote about this. He called it the whispering fog. It remembers the people who died here. It tries to confuse the living. Elara looked at Mara. How do we stop it? We do not listen. Mara said. We focus on the ship. We focus on reality. Elara nodded. She walked to the center of the main deck. Listen to me. She shouted. Her voice was loud and real. It cut through the soft whispers of the fog. There are no ghosts here. There is only us, the ship, and the sea. If you hear a voice, it is a lie. Do not answer it. Do not look for it. Keep your eyes on the compass. The crew looked at their captain. Her strong voice helped them. They nodded and returned to work. They tried to ignore the strange sounds. But an hour later, a new sound cut through the air. It was not a whisper. It was not a memory. It was distinct and metallic. It was the sound of a ship's bell. It came from directly in front of them. "Is that a ghost too?" Jax asked, pulling his pistol. Elara squinted into the white wall. "No," she said. "Ghosts do not ring bells. Hard to port. Turn the wheel. There is something ahead." Jax spun the wheel hard to the left. The muscles in his arms bulged with the effort. The silver falcon leaned sharply. The wooden hull groaned as the ship turned away from the invisible danger. For a moment, there was only the grey fog. Then, a massive dark shape appeared on the right side. It was a ship. It was huge, much bigger than the silver falcon. It passed them very closely. The distance between the two ships was less than 2 meters. The crew held their breath. They waited for a crash, but there was no impact. They drifted past the dark giant in silence. "Is it Blackwood?" whispered Pip, his eyes wide with terror. "No," Elara said. She stood at the railing, staring at the strange vessel. "Look at the wood. Look at the sails." The other ship was a wreck. The wood was black and covered in green slime and seaweed. The sails were not white canvas anymore. They were just tattered rags hanging from the yards. They looked like skeleton fingers. There were no lights on the deck. There was no movement. The bell rang again. It was a lonely, sad sound. Elara saw the bronze bell swinging slowly with the movement of the waves. No one was ringing it. The ocean was ringing it. "It is a ghost ship," Old Tom said, making a sign of protection with his hand. "It is a grave. It is abandoned." Elara corrected him. "Bring us around. I want to go closer." "Captain." Jax looked at her with surprise. "You want to go back?" "Yes," Elara said. "Look at the design of the bow. That is an old galleon. It has been here for a long time. Maybe it has answers. Maybe it has the logbook we need." Jax did not like it, but he obeyed. He steered the silver falcon in a wide circle. They approached the rotting ship again. This time, they moved very slowly. The smell of the old ship hit them. It smelled of wet wood, stale water, and death. It was a cold, heavy smell. Grappling hooks, Elara ordered. The crew threw ropes with metal hooks onto the other ship. The hooks caught the rotten railing. The men pulled the ropes tight. The two ships bumped gently together. Elara climbed onto the railing of the silver falcon. She looked across at the dark, wet deck of the ghost ship. "I'm going over," she said. "Jax, you and 2 men come with me. The rest of you, stay here. Keep your pistols ready. If anything moves over there that is not us, shoot it." "Be careful, Captain," Mara said from the wheel. "The floor might be rotten. You could fall through." Elara nodded. She took a deep breath of the misty air. She jumped across the small gap. Her boots landed on the deck of the ghost ship with a heavy thud. The wood creaked under her weight, but it held. She was aboard. The deck of the ghost ship was treacherous. The wood was black and soft like a sponge. Every step made a wet, squishy sound. Elara held her lantern high. The yellow light pushed back the thick white fog for a few meters. "Stay close," she whispered to Jax and the 2 sailors. "Ben and Griggs. Do not touch anything. This wood is rotten. It might break." They walked slowly toward the back of the ship. The ship was a mess. Ropes lay in piles like dead snakes. Old cannons sat silently, covered in red rust. Near the main mast, Griggs stopped. He pointed with a shaking hand. "Captain, look." On the floor, half covered by a piece of old sail, lay a skeleton. The bones were white and clean. The skeleton wore shreds of a shirt. A rusty sword lay next to its hand. He died fighting. Jack said quietly. He looked around the empty deck. But who did he fight? There are no other bodies. Elara noted. Maybe the sea took them. Come on. We need the captain's cabin. They reached the heavy wooden door at the stern of the ship. The door was closed. A sign above it said the Sea King. That was the name of the ship. Elara said, I heard stories of the Sea King. It disappeared 10 years ago carrying gold. Elara tried to open the door, but the handle was stuck with rust. Jax, she said, stepping back. Jax stepped forward. He kicked the door near the lock. The old wood splintered, and the door swung open. The air inside the cabin was stale and dry. It smelled of old paper and dust. It was different from the wet deck outside. Elara walked in first. The room was surprisingly tidy. There was a large wooden desk in the center. Behind the desk sat a chair, and in the chair sat the captain. He was a skeleton now, wearing a dusty blue coat with gold buttons. His head rested on the desk, as if he was sleeping. Rest in peace. Elara whispered respectfully. She walked to the desk. Under the captain's bony hand was a thick book. It was bound in black leather. Elara gently moved the skeletal hand aside. She picked up the book. Is that it? Ben asked from the doorway. He did not want to come inside. Elara opened the book. The pages were yellow and stiff, but the ink was still black. She read the last entry. It was dated October 14th. The fog does not lift. The crew is mad. We hear voices. We are trapped. If anyone finds this, steer away from the rocks to the east. The treasure is cursed. This is the logbook. Elara said, closing it. It tells us where they went wrong. Suddenly, the ship groaned. The floor tilted slightly. The wreck was sinking. We have to go. Jax shouted. The ship is breaking apart. Elara grabbed the book and ran. They rushed out of the cabin and across the slippery deck. They jumped back onto the Silver Falcon just as the ghost ship groaned one last time. Behind them, the ghost ship the Sea King made a terrible sound. The water rushed into its broken hull. With a loud groan, the old ship sank beneath the surface. The ocean swallowed it. The fog covered the spot where it had been. Now, the Silver Falcon was alone again. Elara stood on the deck, holding the leather logbook. Her hands were shaking slightly. It was not from fear, but from the cold damp air. To my cabin. Elara said to Jax and Mara. We need light. We need to read this. Inside the captain's cabin, Elara lit 2 lanterns. She placed the old book on her desk next to her half-map. She opened the pages carefully. The handwriting was messy, written by a man who was afraid and dying. Read this. Elara said, pointing to a page near the end. Mara leaned forward. She read the words aloud. We have failed. The fog is endless. But I will not let Blackwood take the prize. I have hidden the second piece of the map. It is not on the ship. It is buried at Needle Rock, beneath the white tree. Elara's eyes widened. Needle Rock. Do you know it? Mara nodded slowly. Yes. It is a tiny island, hardly more than a stone in the water. It is 2 days' sail from here, to the west. So, we have one half of the map. Elara said, touching the yellow paper she bought from Silas. And the other half is at Needle Rock. If we put them together, we find the golden anchor. But we are still in the fog. Jax reminded them. How do we get to Needle Rock if we cannot see the sky? Elara turned the page of the logbook. The captain wrote about that too. Look here. She read the next entry. The fog traps those who fight the current. To escape, you must surrender to the cold stream. Let the ship drift west with the deep water. Surrender to the current. Jax asked. That sounds dangerous. If we lose control, we might hit rocks. It is a risk. Elara admitted. But staying here is death. The crew is already hearing voices. If we stay another day, they will go mad. She closed the book. Mara, go to the wheel. Find the coldest water. Let the current take us. Do not fight it. Aye, Captain. Mara said. She looked determined. She left the cabin. Jack stayed for a moment. He looked at the logbook. We are lucky we found this. Yes. Elara said. She rubbed her eyes. But Blackwood is still out there. And if he finds Needle Rock before us, he won't. Jax said confidently. He doesn't have the book. Jax left the room to help Mara. Elara was alone. She opened the drawer of her desk to put the logbook inside. As she did, she saw something strange. The papers in her drawer were moved. The order was different. Elara froze. Someone had been in her cabin while she was on the ghost ship. Someone was looking for something. Elara stared at the open drawer. Her heart beat fast. But this time it was not from fear of the fog or ghosts. It was anger. She was sure. Before she left for the ghost ship, she put her papers in a neat pile. Now, they were messy. Someone had touched them. A spy. She whispered to the empty room. Here. On my ship. She quickly took the leather logbook. She did not leave it in the desk. It was too dangerous. She walked to her bed. She lifted the mattress and hid the book underneath it. Then, she smoothed the blankets. It looked normal. Elara put on her hat and walked out to the main deck. The fog was still thick and white. But the ship was moving now. They were following the cold current west. Just like the dead captain wrote. The air was silent. She stood by the railing and watched her crew. There were 20 men and women. She knew their names. She knew their families. They fought together. They ate together. It was hard to believe one of them was a traitor. But the evidence was in her cabin. She looked at the faces of the sailors. Most of them looked tired and bored. They cleaned the deck or fixed ropes. But Elara looked for something else. She looked for guilt. Near the front of the ship, a sailor named Kale was working on a knot. Kale was young and usually very loud. Today, he was quiet. When Elara looked at him, he looked away quickly. He looked at his feet. Was he guilty? Or just shy? Elara walked up to the quarterdeck where Jack stood. The big man was watching the sails. Jax. Elara said in a low voice. Come with me. Walk with me. They walked to the back of the ship, away from the ears of the crew. What is wrong, Captain? Jax asked. He saw the dark look in her eyes. Someone searched my cabin. Elara said. When we were on the ghost ship, someone was looking for the map. Jax's face turned red with anger. Who? I will throw him overboard. Quiet. Elara hissed. She put a hand on his arm. If we shout, the spy will hide. We must be smart. We must catch him. Do you suspect anyone? Jax asked. I do not know. Elara admitted. But think. Who stayed behind? You, me, Ben, and Griggs were on the ghost ship. So it is not us. That leaves 16 people. Jax said. He looked at the crew with new eyes. He looked suspicious now too. Do not tell them about Needle Rock. Elara ordered. Do not tell them where we are going. Only Mara needs to know the course. If the spy knows the location, he will try to tell Blackwood." "How can he tell Blackwood?" Jax asked. "We are in the middle of the ocean in the fog." "I don't know," Elara said. "But spies are clever. Watch them, Jax. Watch everyone. Tonight, I will not sleep." Night fell over the ocean. The thick white wall of fog began to break apart. There were small holes in the mist, and Elara could see a few stars in the black sky. The air was still cold, but the ship was moving faster now. The current pulled them west, toward Needle Rock. Elara stood on the quarterdeck. She spoke loudly so the crew could hear her. "I am exhausted," she said, stretching her arms. "I am going to my cabin. Do not wake me unless the ship is sinking. Jax, you have the command." Jax nodded. He knew the plan. "Aye, Captain. Sleep well." Elara walked into her cabin and closed the door with a loud click. But she did not go to bed. She worked quickly. She took pillows and blankets and arranged them on her bed. Under the sheet, it looked like a sleeping person. If the spy looked through the keyhole, he would think she was asleep. Then, she took off her bright red coat. She put on a black shirt and black trousers. She wrapped a dark scarf around her head. She looked like a shadow. Elara opened the window carefully. She climbed out onto the narrow wooden ledge on the side of the ship. It was dangerous, but she was agile. She moved along the side of the hull and climbed back onto the deck near the front of the ship. She hid behind a large pile of ropes and barrels. She was invisible in the darkness. She had a clear view of the main deck. The hours passed slowly. It was boring work. Her legs began to cramp, but she did not move. She watched the sailors on the night watch. They walked back and forth. They looked tired. They did not talk much. At midnight, the watch changed. New sailors came up from below. They rubbed their sleep-filled eyes. The ship was quiet. The only sound was the water rushing past the hull. Elara waited. She watched every movement. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, she saw something. A figure separated from the shadows near the main mast. It was a man. He did not walk like he was working. He walked softly, on his toes. He looked left and right. The man walked to the railing at the back of the ship. He leaned over. He looked into the darkness behind the Silver Falcon. Elara held her breath. What is he doing? The man pulled a small object from his jacket. It was a small lantern with a metal cover. He lifted the cover for 1 second, then closed it. A beam of yellow light flashed into the night. He waited. Then he did it again. 3 short flashes. It was a signal. Elara's blood turned cold. The spy was not just looking for the map. He was communicating. He was guiding the enemy. Someone was out there in the dark, watching the light. Elara stayed in the shadows. She did not move. Her eyes were fixed on the man at the railing. He held the small lantern in his hand. He waited. He looked out at the black ocean, staring into the darkness behind the ship. For a long minute, nothing happened. The only movement was the white foam of the waves. Elara hoped she was wrong. She hoped he was just a crazy sailor playing with a light. But then, it happened. Far away, deep in the gloom, a tiny point of light appeared. It was like a weak star on the water. It blinked. Once. Twice. It was an answer. Elara's stomach felt heavy. The light came from another ship. It was following the Silver Falcon. It was the Obsidian. Captain Blackwood was not lost in the fog. He was right behind them, guided by the traitor on Elara's deck. The spy at the railing relaxed. He seemed satisfied. He put the cover back over his lantern. He turned around to go back to the crew's quarters. Elara knew she had to act now. She could not let him go below deck. She stepped out from behind the pile of barrels. She stood tall in her black clothes. She looked like a ghost of vengeance. She walked silently across the wooden deck. She was fast. Before the man could take 5 steps, Elara was behind him. She pulled her pistol from her belt. She pressed the cold metal against the back of his head. "Do not move," Elara whispered. Her voice was ice cold. "If you move, you die." The man froze. His body became stiff. He dropped the lantern. It hit the deck and rolled away. "Turn around slowly," Elara commanded. The man turned. The moonlight shined on his face. Elara expected to see a stranger, or maybe a new crew member, but when she saw the face, she felt a sharp pain in her heart. It was Cale. Cale was young, only 19 years old. Elara had found him begging in the streets of Oakhaven 2 years ago. She gave him a job. She gave him food. She taught him how to tie knots. She treated him like family. "Cale," Elara said. Her voice broke slightly. "Why?" The boy was shaking. His eyes were wide with terror. He looked at the pistol, then at Elara. Tears ran down his dirty face. I had no choice. Captain." Cale stammered. "He has my sister. Blackwood has my sister." "So you sold us to him?" Elara asked. Her anger was rising. "You sold your ship. Your friends. He said he would kill her." Cale cried. "He said if I didn't signal, she would die." The noise woke the other sailors on watch. Jax ran up from the lower deck. He saw Elara holding the gun and Cale crying. "Captain?" Jax asked, confused. "What is happening?" "We found our spy," Elara said, never taking her eyes off Cale. "And we found out that we are not alone. Blackwood is here." The silence of the night was broken. The crew of the Silver Falcon ran onto the main deck. They wore their sleeping clothes. They held knives and pistols. They saw their captain standing over Cale. They saw the gun in her hand. They saw the lantern on the floor. "What happened?" Old Tom asked. He looked at Cale, who was crying on the wooden planks. "Cale is a traitor," Jack said. His voice was loud and deep. He walked to the boy and grabbed his collar. He lifted Cale up easily. He signaled Blackwood. "He led the enemy to us." The crew gasped. A murmur of anger went through the group. They looked at Cale with hate. They worked with him, ate with him, and laughed with him. Now, they wanted to hurt him. "He sold us," shouted Griggs. He stepped forward with a knife. "Let's throw him to the sharks." "Back!" Elara shouted. She stepped between Griggs and Cale. "Nobody touches him. He is my prisoner. He deserves to die." "Captain," Griggs argued. "He put a target on our backs. He did it to save his sister," Elara said. She looked at Cale with cold eyes. "But he made a terrible choice. Cale, listen to me. This is the most important question of your life. How close is Blackwood?" Cale wiped his nose. He was shaking uncontrollably. "Close," he whispered. "He is just behind the horizon. He was waiting for my third signal. I gave the signal." "Does he know we are going to Needle Rock?" Elara asked. "No." Cale sobbed. "I did not know. I only told him our location." Elara nodded. That was one small piece of good news. She turned to Jax. "Take him below. Put him in the brig." Chain him to the wall. If he escapes, you answer to me." "Aye, Captain," Jack said. He dragged Cale away. The boy did not fight. He walked with his head down, ashamed. Elara turned to her crew. They were still angry and confused. "Listen to me," Elara commanded. "Forget the boy. He is in the past. We have a future to fight for." Blackwood saw the signal. "That means he is coming. He thinks we are sleeping. He thinks he can surprise us." She looked at the dark ocean. "We will show him he is wrong. We will be ready." "What do we do, Captain?" Mara asked. "Extinguish all lights," Elara ordered. "Make the ship dark. Load the cannons. Prepare the muskets. We will wait in the silence. When he comes close, we will not be the prey. We will be the hunters." The crew moved fast. The anger about the betrayal turned into focus. They ran to the gun deck. They opened the gun ports. They pushed the heavy iron cannons into position. They loaded the black powder and the heavy iron balls. On the main deck, Elara stood by the wheel. She watched the spot where she saw the light. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. Blackwood was a cruel man. This battle would be hard. "Come on, Blackwood," she whispered to the wind. "Come and get it." The ocean was silent, but it was a heavy, suffocating silence. The silver falcon drifted in the darkness. There were no lights on board. The crew lay flat on the deck, hiding behind the wooden railings. They held their breath. Down below, on the gun deck, the gunners stood ready with matches burning slowly in their hands. Captain Elara stood at the wheel. She did not hide. She was the bait. She watched the black water with intensity. Then, a shape separated itself from the night. It was a massive shadow, taller and wider than their own ship. It moved silently, like a predator stalking its prey. It was the obsidian. "Steady," Elara whispered to herself. "Wait for it." The enemy ship came closer. It was confident. Blackwood thought Elara's crew was asleep. He thought he had the advantage. Suddenly, a voice roared across the water from the enemy deck. "Surrender, Elara, or sink." Elara did not answer. A moment later, the side of the obsidian lit up with bright orange flashes. A split second later, the thunderous roar of cannons broke the silence. The air filled with the terrifying whistle of flying iron. One cannonball missed the silver falcon and splashed huge columns of water onto the deck. Another hit the wooden hull with a sickening crunch. Wood splinters flew through the air like deadly needles. The ship rocked violently to the side, throwing Elara against the wheel. "Now!" Elara screamed. "Fire!" Her order was instantaneous. On the gun deck, the crew applied their matches to the touch holes of the cannons. The silver falcon erupted in smoke and fire. 6 cannons fired at the same time. The ship jumped back from the force of the recoil. The noise was deafening. It hurt the ears and shook the bones. The iron balls flew across the short distance. They smashed into the side of the obsidian. Elara heard the sound of breaking timber and the shouts of surprised men on the other ship. Blackwood did not expect a fight. He expected a slaughter. "Reload," Jax shouted from the main deck. "Faster, before they fire again." Smoke covered everything. It was thick and white, smelling strongly of sulfur and burning wood. It burned the eyes and the throat. Through the smoke, Elara saw the enemy ship turning. They were trying to bring their other side around to fire more cannons. "Hard to port," Elara ordered Mara. "Get us behind them. Do not let them use their broadside." Mara spun the wheel. The silver falcon was smaller and faster. It turned sharply, cutting through the waves. But the obsidian was dangerous. A swivel gun from their upper deck fired. A small ball of lead hit the mast near Elara's head. It took a chunk of wood out of the pole. "They are targeting the wheel." Mara shouted, "Keep turning." Elara yelled back, "We have to fight." The battle had begun, and the peaceful ocean was now a zone of fire and death. The space between the two ships was a chaotic zone of death. The smoke from the cannons was so thick that the sailors could hardly see their own hands. The air smelled of sulfur and burning wood. The noise was constant, the boom of heavy guns, the crack of muskets, and the shouting of men. The Silver Falcon was faster, but the Obsidian was a fortress. Blackwood's ship had twice as many cannons. Every time the Obsidian fired, the ocean shook. "Reload. Fire at will." Jax roared on the gun deck. His face was black with soot. He worked alongside the crew, pushing heavy iron balls into the hot cannons. Elara stayed at the wheel. She steered the ship through the splashes of water. "Mara, keep us moving. If we stop, we are dead." "I am trying." Mara shouted back. She fought the wheel. "He is trying to box us in." Through a gap in the smoke, Elara saw the enemy deck. She saw Captain Blackwood. He stood on his quarterdeck, wearing his fine velvet coat. He was not hiding. He was laughing. He enjoyed the destruction. He looked across the water and saw Elara. He tipped his hat to her, mocking her. "Bring us closer." Blackwood ordered his men. "Throw the hooks. We will board them." Sailors on the Obsidian swung heavy ropes with iron hooks. They wanted to pull the two ships together. If they boarded, Elara's crew would lose. There were too many enemies. "Muskets." Elara ordered, "Target the men with the ropes." Her crew on the upper deck fired their rifles. Two of Blackwood's men fell. The grappling hooks missed the Silver Falcon and fell harmlessly into the sea. But then, disaster struck. The Obsidian fired a full broadside, 10 cannons at once. The impact was terrible. The wooden railing of the Silver Falcon exploded into splinters. A large hole opened in the side of the hull above the waterline. The ship leaned heavily to the right. Griggs fell to the deck, bleeding from a cut on his head. "They are too strong," he yelled. Elara looked at her ship. It was bleeding. Her crew was brave, but they were outgunned. She looked at the map in her mind. To the west, there was a line of dangerous jagged rocks called the Devil's Teeth. Big ships could not go there. "We cannot win this fight." Elara realized. "We have to run." She grabbed Mara's shoulder. "Turn west. Toward the reef." "The reef." Mara looked at her with fear. "That is suicide. The rocks will tear the bottom of the ship. It is our only chance." Elara said grimly, "Blackwood cannot follow us there. Turn the wheel. Mara. Now." Mara spun the wheel. The Silver Falcon turned away from the fight. They sailed straight toward the white, foaming water where the deadly rocks waited. The water ahead was terrifying. It was not blue. It was white with foam. Sharp black rocks stuck out of the waves like the teeth of a giant monster. This was the reef. Sailors called it the Devil's Teeth because many ships died here. "Hold on." Elara shouted to her crew. "This will be rough." The Silver Falcon sailed straight into the white water. The waves were higher here, pushed up by the shallow rocks. The ship bounced up and down violently. Behind them, the Obsidian followed for a moment. But then, Captain Blackwood realized the danger. His ship was too heavy and too deep. If he entered the reef, he would crash immediately. "He is turning away." Jax shouted from the stern. "He is afraid." Elara did not look back. She stood at the front of the ship, holding onto the railing with one hand. She used the other hand to signal Mara at the wheel. "Starboard! Hard starboard!" Elara yelled over the roar of the waves. Mara spun the wheel to the right. The ship turned just in time. A massive rock passed by the side of the hull. It was so close that Elara could almost touch it. The black stone was wet and slippery. "Port! Now!" Elara commanded. Mara spun the wheel back to the left. The ship wove through the rocks like a needle through cloth. It was a deadly dance. One mistake, 1 second too slow, and they would sink. The crew was silent with fear. They watched the rocks pass by. They trusted their captain and their navigator. But the danger was extreme. Suddenly, a large wave pushed the ship sideways. It pushed them toward 2 rocks that were very close together. "Straight! Go through the middle!" Elara screamed. "It is too narrow!" Mara shouted back, her eyes wide. "Go!" Elara ordered. The ship rushed toward the gap. The wooden sides of the ship scraped against the stone. There was a terrible grinding sound. It sounded like the ship was screaming in pain. The whole vessel shook. Men fell to the deck. But they did not stop. The ship pushed through the gap. Wood splinters flew into the water. But the hull did not break open. They burst out of the reef into the open water on the other side. The waves here were smaller. The water turned deep blue again. They were through. Elara looked back. The reef was a wall of white foam and black rock behind them. Far away, on the other side, she saw the obsidian. It was turning around. Blackwood could not follow them. He had to sail the long way around the dangerous rocks. It would take him days. Elara walked back to the quarterdeck. Her legs felt weak. She looked at Mara. The navigator was pale and sweating. But she smiled weakly. "We did it." Mara whispered. "Yes." Elara said. She patted the wooden wheel. "But not without a cost. The ship is hurt. We need to check the damage." The dangerous white foam of the Devil's Teeth Reef was far behind them. The ocean was blue and calm again. But on the Silver Falcon, there was no celebration. The ship was safe from Blackwood. But it was not safe from the sea. The sound of water was everywhere. It was not the pleasant sound of waves. It was the sound of water inside the ship. "Report!" Elara shouted as she walked down the stairs to the lower deck. The water here was already up to her ankles. It was cold and dark. Elias, the carpenter, stood in the water. He held a lantern. He looked very serious. "It is bad, Captain." The rocks scraped the bottom of the hull. "The wood is thin there. And we have a hole from the cannonball on the starboard side." "Is it sinking?" Elara asked directly. "Not yet," Elias said. "But the water is coming in faster than we can pump it out. If we do not fix the leaks now, we will be swimming in 3 hours." Elara nodded. There was no time to waste. "Jax!" She yelled up the stairs. "Get the pumps moving. I want 2 teams. Rotate every hour. Do not stop." On the main deck, the crew began the hard work. They grabbed the handles of the wooden pumps. The pumps sucked the water from the bottom of the ship and spilled it back into the ocean. It was heavy, tiring work. The sailors' muscles burned. But they found a rhythm. Down below, Elara helped Elias. They gathered wood, nails, and a pot of black tar. The air smelled of damp wood and hot pitch. "We need to patch the cannon hole first," Elias said. He measured a piece of thick oak. He cut it with his saw. Elara held the wood in place against the broken planks. The water pushed against it from the outside, trying to get in. It was cold and strong. "Hold it tight," Elias shouted. He swung his heavy hammer. He drove long iron nails into the wood. Slowly, the flow of water stopped. Elias used a brush to paint hot tar over the cracks. The tar hardened quickly, sealing the hole. "That is one," Elias said, wiping sweat from his face. "Now the scrape." They worked through the night. The crew on the pumps sang low, slow songs to keep their rhythm. They were exhausted from the battle and the escape, but they knew they could not sleep. If the pump stopped, the ship died. By morning, the water in the lower deck was gone. The pumps stopped. The silence was beautiful. Elara walked up to the deck. Her clothes were covered in tar and salt. Her hands were blistered. She looked at her ship. The Silver Falcon was scarred. There were patches of new wood on the hull. The railing was broken. The sails had holes. "She is ugly," Jack said, handing Elara a cup of water. "But she floats." "She is beautiful," Elara corrected him. "She drank the water. She saved our lives. Now, let the men sleep. We drift for a few hours." The adrenaline of the battle and the desperate repairs faded away. Now, a new feeling took over the ship. It was a heavy, gray feeling. It was exhaustion mixed with anger. For 3 days, the Silver Falcon sailed west toward Needle Rock. The ship was not the same. It moved slowly because of the heavy patches on the hull. The sails were full of holes, sewn together with rough thread. The ship looked like a beggar, not a proud hunter. The crew was in pain. Almost everyone had a bandage. Some had cuts from flying wood, others had burns from the cannons. Their bodies hurt, but their minds hurt more. They had seen death very close up. They saw how powerful Blackwood was. At dinner time, the mood was tense. The crew sat on the deck, eating their rations. The food was boring, hard salted meat and dry biscuits. There was no fresh fruit left. Griggs, the sailor with the bandage on his head, looked at his biscuit. He made a face of disgust. He threw the biscuit onto the wooden deck. It made a hard sound. "I am tired of this," Griggs said loudly. "We eat like rats. We live like rats." "Be quiet, Griggs," Old Tom said gently. "Eat your food. It gives you strength." "Strength for what?" Griggs asked. He looked around at the other sailors. "To fight Blackwood again. Look at us. We cannot fight him. Next time, he will sink us in 5 minutes." A few other sailors nodded. "He is right." A woman named Bess said, "We barely escaped. And for what? For half a map. For a story about a golden anchor that maybe does not exist. The captain says it exists." Jax growled from the corner. He sharpened his knife. "And you will trust the captain?" "I trust her," Griggs said, standing up. "But she is chasing a ghost. And she is keeping a traitor alive." He pointed to the locked door of the brig on the lower deck. "The boy, Cale, sold us. And he eats the same food as us. It is not right. He is a prisoner." Jack said, "He will face justice." "Justice?" Griggs laughed bitterly. "Justice is a rope around his neck. If we keep him, we are weak." The air on the deck was hot and angry. The crew was divided. Some supported Elara and Jax, others agreed with Griggs. They were scared. Fear often turns into anger. Captain Elara stood on the quarterdeck above them. She heard every word. She did not interfere yet. She watched her crew. She saw the doubt in their eyes. She knew that a broken ship could be fixed with wood and nails. But a broken crew was much harder to fix. If she did not do something soon, the anger would turn into mutiny. They needed hope. They needed to remember why they were here. Elara walked down the stairs from the quarterdeck. Her heavy boots hit the wood with a solid rhythm. She walked into the middle of the angry sailors. She did not look afraid. She looked at Griggs. She looked at Bess. She looked at every tired, angry face. The talking stopped. The only sound was the wind in the torn sails. "You are right, Griggs," Elara said calmly. Her voice was not loud, but everyone could hear her. "We are tired. We are hungry. The ship is ugly." Griggs looked down at his feet. He was embarrassed, but he was still angry. "We are just saying the truth, Captain." "I know," Elara said. She held up her hands. They were covered in bandages and black tar. "Look at my hands. I work with you. I bleed with you. I do not sit in a palace while you work. I am a sailor, just like you." She walked around the circle of men and women. "You ask if the prize is worth it." Elara continued. "You ask if the golden anchor is real. I tell you, it is real. But if you want to quit, you can quit. We can turn the ship around. We can go back to Oakhaven." She paused. She looked deep into their eyes. "But think about what waits for you in Oakhaven. Do you want to clean floors for rich merchants? Do you want to beg for coins on the street? Do you want to be servants for men like Captain Blackwood?" The crew stayed silent. They remembered their lives before the ship. They remembered the poverty and the hunger. They hated that life more than they hated the danger. "I offer you something else," Elara said. Her voice grew stronger. "I offer you freedom. The golden anchor is not just gold. It is a life where you are the master. It is a house for your family, Griggs. It is a farm for you, Bess. It is a life where no one tells you what to do." "And the boy?" Griggs asked quietly. "The traitor. He is in chains," Elara said firmly. "He will be punished. But we are not animals. We do not kill for sport. We are the crew of the Silver Falcon. We have a code. We stay together. We fight together." She put her hand on her sword. "I'm going to Needle Rock. I'm going to find the second map. Who is with me?" Griggs looked at the captain. He saw the fire in her eyes. He took a deep breath. "I am with you, Captain," he said. "And me," said old Tom. "And me," said Bess. Slowly, the anger evaporated. Hope returned. "Captain!" Mara shouted from the wheel. Her voice was full of excitement. "Look! Ahead on the horizon." Elara turned. Far to the west, rising out of the blue water like a sharp finger, was a tall, thin island of stone. It was Needle Rock. "We are here." Elara smiled. "Get ready to work." Needle Rock was exactly as the logbook described. It was a small, sharp island made of grey stone. It looked like a finger pointing at the sky. There was no beach, only jagged rocks. In the center of the island stood a single, dead tree. The sun and salt had turned its wood bone white. Elara and Jax took the small boat to the shore. The waves were rough, crashing against the stones. They climbed up the slippery rocks to the white tree. "This is the place," Elara said. She took a shovel from the boat. Jax dug into the hard earth between the roots of the tree. The ground was dry and tough. After 10 minutes of hard work, the metal shovel hit something hard. Jax cleared away the dirt. He pulled out a small, rusted iron box. Elara took the box. Her hands shook slightly. She used her dagger to open the lid. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth to keep it dry, was a piece of yellow paper. She unfolded it. It was the missing half. She took her own piece from her pocket. She placed the two papers together on a flat rock. The torn edges matched perfectly. The lines of the coast connected. The path to the golden anchor was complete. "We have it," Jax whispered. He looked at the map with wonder. "It is real." "Yes," Elara said. She studied the paper. "But look here. The final location. The writing is in a strange language. I do not recognize these symbols. And look at the ship," Jax added, pointing out to sea. The silver falcon floated in the water. From here, the damage was clear. The hull was scarred. The masts were weak. The sails were full of patches. "We cannot go to the treasure like this," Elara admitted. "The ocean around the golden anchor is rough. If we go now, the ship will break apart. We need real repairs. We need strong wood and new canvas." "There is a place," Jax said. "Driftwood Bay. It is a trading post 2 days from here. It is neutral ground. Pirates and merchants trade there. No navy. No laws." "Is it safe?" Elara asked. "No." Jax laughed. "But they have wood. And they have rum." Elara packed the map away carefully. "Then we go to Driftwood Bay." The journey took 2 days. When they arrived, Driftwood Bay was busy and noisy. It was a town built on stilts over the water. Ships from all over the world were docked there. The air smelled of roasting meat, spices, and tar. Elara steered the Silver Falcon to a free dock. People on the pier stopped to look. They saw the battle damage on the ship. They pointed and whispered. They knew this ship had seen a great fight. "Keep your weapons close," Elara ordered her crew. "This place is full of thieves. We are here for business, not for trouble. Jax, find a carpenter who sells oak. I need to find someone who can read ancient symbols." The crew disembarked. They were happy to be on solid ground, surrounded by food and life. But Elara kept her hand on her sword. Neutral ground meant no laws, and Blackwood had spies everywhere. While Jax and the crew worked on the ship, Captain Elara had a different mission. She walked through the crowded market of Driftwood Bay. The wooden walkways were slippery and narrow. People from every nation were there selling spices, silk, and weapons. The noise was loud, but Elara did not look at the goods. She looked for a sign. She asked a shopkeeper about a translator. The man pointed to a small, crooked house at the very end of the longest pier. "Go there," the man said. "Ask for Mira. She knows all the languages of the sea. But she is expensive." Elara walked to the small house. The door was made of dark wood and covered in strange carvings. She knocked 3 times. "Enter," a scratchy voice said from inside. Elara opened the door. The room was dark and smelled of dried herbs and strong tea. Candles burned on a low table. Behind the table sat an old woman. Her hair was white and wild. Her skin was wrinkled like an old map. She wore many necklaces made of shells and bones. "You are a captain," Mira said. She did not look up. She was mixing leaves in a bowl. "You smell of salt and blood." "I am Elara Vance," Elara said respectfully. "I have something I cannot read." Elara took the map from her coat. She folded it so only the strange symbols at the bottom were visible. She did not want Mira to see the location of the treasure. Mira laughed softly. "You are careful. That is good." She took the paper. She brought a candle closer. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at the ink. "Ah," Mira whispered. "I have not seen this writing for 50 years. This is the language of the old corsairs. The first pirates." "What does it say?" Elara asked. Mira traced the symbols with a long finger. "It is a set of instructions. It says, to open the door, you must feed the serpent. Wait for the green sun. The heart of the island beats only for the brave. Feed the serpent." Elara repeated. "What does that mean?" "It is a riddle," Mira said. She looked at Elara with her sharp, pale eyes. "The serpent is likely a rock formation or a cave entrance. Feeding it might mean the tide. You must enter when the water is high. And the green sun. A rare phenomenon," Mira explained. "At sunset, sometimes the sun turns green for 1 second before it disappears. It happens when the sky is very clear. That is your signal." Elara took the map back. "Thank you, Mira." She put 3 gold coins on the table. Mira did not touch the money. "Be careful, Captain. The old corsairs protected their gold with traps. The text warns of a curse of greed. If you take too much, the mountain will swallow you." "I only want the anchor," Elara said. "That is what they all say." Mira replied dryly. "But gold has a way of changing people." Elara left the dark hut. The fresh sea air felt good. She had the translation. She knew the time, sunset, and she knew the danger. She walked back to the ship. She needed to tell Jax. They were going to Skull Island. When Elara returned to the dock, the Silver Falcon looked like a new ship. The carpenters of Driftwood Bay were fast and skilled. The ugly patches on the hull were gone, replaced by strong, smooth oak planks. The sails were white and crisp. The holes from the battle were only memories now. Jax stood at the bottom of the gangplank. He was wiping his hands on a rag. He looked tired but satisfied. "She is ready, Captain," Jax said. "New wood, fresh water, and the cannons are cleaned. We are heavier, but we are stronger." "Good work, Jax," Elara said. "Gather the officers in my cabin. We leave in 1 hour." 10 minutes later, Jax, Mara, and old Tom stood around the captain's desk. Elara placed the 2 halves of the map together. For the first time, the crew saw the whole picture. "The destination is here," Elara said. She pointed to a lonely island in the far south. The drawing of the island looked like a human skull. Skull Island. "I have heard stories of this place," old Tom whispered. He looked nervous. "They say the water there is full of sharks, and the rocks are sharp like knives. It is dangerous." Elara agreed. "But we have the key." She repeated the words of the wise woman. "Feed the serpent. Wait for the green sun." "Green sun?" Mara asked, frowning. "That is a navigator's legend. It happens very rarely. We have to be lucky." "We make our own luck," Elara said firmly. "Mara, calculate the course. We need to be there at sunset in 3 days." "Aye, Captain," Mara said. She took her compass and began to measure the distance on the map. "South by southwest. With this wind, we can do it." Elara looked at her friends. "This is the end of the journey. Blackwood is behind us. But he is not gone. He will find us eventually. We must get the treasure and leave before he arrives. Are you ready?" "We are ready," Jax said. He put his heavy hand on the table. Tom and Mara nodded. They walked out to the main deck. The crew was working hard. preparing the ropes. Elara felt a surge of pride. They were not just a ragtag group of sailors anymore. They were a team. They had survived storms, hunger, thirst, and battles. Cast off. Elara shouted. Raise the anchor. Set the mainsail. The crew cheered. They pulled the ropes with energy. The wind caught the new white sails, and the Silver Falcon pulled away from the dock. The busy sounds of Driftwood Bay faded behind them. Ahead lay the open ocean. It was vast and blue. Elara stood at the wheel. She felt the power of the ship under her feet. She looked south. Somewhere over the horizon, the gold was waiting. But she knew the hardest test was still to come. The riddle was not just a puzzle. It was a warning. The wind was perfect. It blew strong from the north, pushing the Silver Falcon toward its destination. The new white sails were tight and full. The ship cut through the water smoothly, leaving a long line of white foam behind it. For the first day, the ocean was empty. Captain Elara stood at the wheel, checking the horizon every 10 minutes. She was nervous. She knew Captain Blackwood. He was not a man who gave up easily. If she had the map, he wanted it. Relax, Captain, Jack said on the second morning. He was eating an apple. We left him at the reef. His ship is heavy. He cannot catch us now. Do not underestimate him. Elara warned. He is driven by greed. Greed makes men do impossible things. At midday, the sun was high and bright. The crew was in good spirits. They talked about the gold. They planned what they would buy. A house, a farm, a new boat. Suddenly, a shout came from above. It was Pip in the crow's nest. His voice was high and full of fear. Sail! Sail behind us! Elara ran to the railing. She pulled out her telescope. She looked north. At first, she saw nothing. Then, she saw a small dark speck against the blue sky. She adjusted the glass. The speck became a ship. It had black sails. It is the Obsidian. Elara said coldly. She lowered the telescope. How? Jax asked, dropping his apple. We have new sails. We are faster. He is pushing his ship. Mara said, looking at the enemy. Look at his sails. He has every piece of cloth raised. He is risking his masts to catch us. The mood on the Silver Falcon changed instantly. The dreams of farms and houses vanished. The reality of the chase returned. Full sail. Elara ordered. Wet the canvas. We need every inch of speed. The sailors ran to the ropes. They threw buckets of water onto the sails. Wet sails hold the wind better. The ship surged forward. The wood creaked under the pressure. But the Obsidian did not fall back. It grew larger. Slowly, very slowly. It was getting closer. Blackwood was gaining on them. He wants to catch us before we reach the island. Jack said. He wants to fight in the open water. We cannot fight him again. Elara said. We must reach the island first. The shallow water there will protect us. Hours passed. The sun began to go down. The race was intense. The crew watched the black ship behind them. They could see the white bone in its teeth. The foam at the front of the ship. Land ho! Mara shouted from the wheel. Elara looked forward. On the southern horizon, a dark shape rose from the sea. It was a large, rocky island. Two tall mountains looked like empty eyes. A white beach looked like teeth. It was Skull Island. We are close. Elara said. But so is he. A puff of white smoke appeared from the front of the Obsidian. A moment later, a dull boom rolled across the water. A cannonball splashed into the sea. 500 meters behind the Silver Falcon. He is in range. Jax growled. Hold the course. Elara yelled. We are almost there. Skull Island was huge in front of them now. It was a terrifying place. The rocks were black and sharp. The trees were dark green. But the most dangerous thing was the water. The ocean around the island was boiling. The currents from the east met the currents from the west, creating chaos. The waves were not organized lines. They were unpredictable mountains of dark water. They rose up and crashed down with terrible force. Hold on. Elara screamed. She tied a rope around her waist and secured it to the wheel stand. Everyone, tie yourselves to the ship. The crew scrambled to find ropes. The deck of the Silver Falcon tilted steeply. The ship climbed up the side of a massive wave. It felt like climbing a hill. At the top, the ship hung in the air for a second. Then, it fell down the other side. The bow hit the bottom of the wave. White foam exploded over the deck. The water rushed past Elara's legs, pulling at her boots. Behind them, the obsidian was struggling too. Captain Blackwood stopped firing his cannons. He could not aim in this rough water. His ship was bigger and heavier, so it did not bounce like the Silver Falcon. It smashed through the waves, but it was slow. We are gaining distance. Jax shouted. He wiped salt water from his eyes. The rough water helps us, but it can kill us too. Mara yelled back. She helped Elara hold the wheel. The wooden spokes kicked and fought against their hands. The current is pulling us toward the cliffs. To their right, a wall of rock rose out of the sea. The waves crashed against it, sending spray high into the air. If the ship hit those rocks, it would be destroyed in seconds. Steer left. Elara ordered. Fight the current. They pulled the wheel with all their strength. The ship turned slowly, fighting the push of the ocean. A giant wave, bigger than the others, approached from the side. It looked like a dark green monster. Brace! Elara shouted. The wave hit the side of the ship. The Silver Falcon leaned over so far that the top of the mast almost touched the water. Barrels rolled across the deck. Ropes snapped tight. For a terrifying moment, Elara thought the ship would turn upside down. But the ship was strong. It righted itself. It shook off the water like a wet dog. Is everyone safe? Elara called out. The crew shouted back. They were wet and scared, but they were still there. Look out! Griggs screamed from the front of the ship. Another wave was coming. This one was fast and sharp. It hit the bow with a sound like a cannon shot. The ship jerked violently. Man overboard! Someone screamed. Help! Man overboard! Elara's heart stopped. She looked at the churning white water. A head bobbed in the waves, moving away from the ship fast. Elara looked over the side of the ship. In the churning white foam, she saw a flash of red cloth. It was Bess. The strong sailor was fighting for her life against the massive waves. The cold water pulled her down, and the current dragged her away from the ship. Bess! Elara screamed. She looked at Mara. Turn the ship. We have to go back. Captain! Mara shouted, her face pale. If we turn broadside to these waves, we will capsize. And Blackwood is right behind us. I do not care about Blackwood. Elara yelled. I will not leave my crew to drown. Turn the wheel. Mara gritted her teeth and spun the heavy wooden wheel. The Silver Falcon turned slowly. A giant wave hit the side of the ship. The vessel leaned dangerously. Water rushed across the deck, knocking barrels into the sea. But the ship did not flip. It faced the wind again. Jax ran to the railing. He held a long rope with a heavy knot at the end. He looked at Bess in the water. She was 20 meters away. She was tired. Her head went under the water, then came back up. She was coughing. Catch! Jax roared. He threw the rope with all his strength. The rope flew through the air, but the strong wind blew it sideways. It landed 2 meters away from Bess. She tried to swim to it, but a wave pushed her back. I missed. Jax shouted. Bring us closer. Captain. Elara pushed the wheel. She watched the rocks. They were dangerously close now. She could see the black stone shining with wetness. One mistake, and the ship would break apart. Hold on. Bess. Elara whispered. The ship moved closer. 10 meters. 5 meters. The wooden hull blocked the wind for a moment. The water was calmer near the ship. Jax climbed onto the railing. He did not use the rope this time. He lay on his stomach on the wet wood. Hold my legs. He ordered Griggs and Ben. The 2 men grabbed Jax's ankles. Jax reached his long, muscular arms down toward the water. Bess. Reach up. Jax screamed. Bess looked up. Her eyes were full of panic. She used her last energy to push herself out of the water. She reached up with a shaking hand. Jax stretched. His fingers touched hers. Then, he grabbed her wrist. His grip was like iron. I have her. Jax yelled. Pull us in. Griggs and Ben pulled Jax backward. Jax pulled Bess. She flew out of the water and landed heavily on the deck. She coughed up salt water, shivering violently. Clear the area. Elara shouted. Mara, get us out of here. Full speed to the bay. Mara spun the wheel back. The sails caught the wind. The Silver Falcon turned away from the deadly rocks just in time. They sailed past the breaking waves and entered the calm water of the island's bay. They were safe. The calm water of the bay was a shock after the violence of the open ocean. The Silver Falcon drifted slowly into the shadow of the massive island. Here, the wind was blocked by the high cliffs. The air was still and heavy. It smelled of wet stone and old jungle. The crew stood on the deck, looking up. Skull Island earned its name. The 2 tall mountains looked like the empty eyes of a giant skull. Below them, a row of sharp white rocks looked like teeth. It was an ugly, frightening place. Drop the anchor. Elara ordered softly. Her voice echoed against the rock walls. The heavy iron anchor splashed into the dark water. The ship stopped. They were safe from the waves, but they were not safe from Blackwood. He would find a way through the rough water soon. We have very little time. Elara said to Jax. The sun is already low. We must find the entrance before sunset. She looked at the map again, then at the island. She scanned the coastline with her telescope. She looked for the serpent. There. She whispered. She pointed to the left side of the bay. Rising out of the water near the beach was a strange rock formation. It was long and twisted. At the top, a large stone shaped like a snake's head looked down at the sea. Its mouth was open. The serpent. Jax said. It looks hungry. Prepare the longboat. Elara commanded. Jax, Mara, Griggs, and Ben, you are with me. Bring muskets and torches. The rest of you, stay on the ship. If Blackwood arrives, defend the bay. The selected crew climbed down into the small boat. They rowed silently across the black water. The only sound was the dip of the oars. As they got closer to the beach, the island felt even bigger. The trees were twisted and covered in grey moss. There were no birds singing. It was a dead place. The boat crunched onto the black sand beach. Elara jumped out. She checked her pistol. She checked her sword. "This way," she said, leading them toward the Serpent Rock. They walked across the sand. The ground was littered with old bones, fish bones, bird bones, and maybe other things. When they reached the base of the Serpent Rock, they saw a dark hole in the cliff behind it. It was a cave entrance, but it was blocked by a heavy stone door. There was no handle. There was no keyhole. "This is it," Elara said. She touched the cold stone door. "To open the door, you must feed the serpent." She looked at the Serpent Rock. The mouth of the stone snake was open, but it was empty. Below it, a small channel was carved into the rock. It led from the sea to the snake's mouth. The tide. Mara realized. The tide is rising. When the water gets high enough, it will flow into the mouth. "We have to wait," Elara said, looking at the setting sun. "Everything depends on the water and the light." The sun began to touch the water on the horizon. The sky turned a deep, bloody red. On the black sand beach of Skull Island, Captain Elara and her small team waited. They stood next to the massive Serpent Rock. The air was hot and silent. "The water is rising," Jax whispered. He pointed to the small channel carved in the stone. The ocean tide was coming in. The water flowed up the beach. It filled the channel and moved toward the open mouth of the stone snake. As the water reached the mouth, it poured inside. The stone snake seemed to drink the sea. Suddenly, a deep vibration shook the ground under their boots. It felt like the island was waking up. "It is working," Mara said, her eyes wide. "The weight of the water is unlocking a mechanism inside the cliff. But the door is still closed." Griggs noted nervously. He looked at the heavy stone slab blocking the cave entrance. "We cannot push it." "Wait," Elara said. She looked at the setting sun. "Remember the wise woman. Wait for the green sun." The red sun sank lower. Half of it was under the water now. The light on the beach became dim. The shadows of the twisted trees grew long and scary. The crew held their breath. They watched the horizon intensely. Then, it happened. The very top edge of the sun disappeared below the waves. For one split second, the light changed from red to a brilliant, electric green. The green light flashed across the water. It shone through a small hole in the serpent's stone head. A beam of green light hit the center of the stone door. The sound of a heavy lock opening echoed in the small bay. Then came the sound of grinding stone. The massive door began to slide open slowly. It revealed a dark, cool tunnel leading into the heart of the mountain. "Open!" Jax cheered. "We did it!" "Light the torches," Elara ordered quickly. "We go in now." Ben struck a flint and lit a torch. The orange fire illuminated the entrance. It looked like the throat of a beast. "Captain!" Griggs shouted. He was looking out at the bay, not at the cave. "Look!" Elara turned around. Her heart sank. Entering the bay, sailing out of the shadows of the cliffs, was a large ship. Its black sails were torn, and its hull was damaged from the rough waves. But it was still floating. It was the Obsidian. Blackwood. Elara cursed. He found a way through the waves. The enemy ship was only a kilometer away. Elara could see the tiny figures of men on the deck. They were lowering boats into the water. They were coming ashore. "We have lost the advantage of time," Elara said grimly. "They will be on the beach in 20 minutes. Should we fight them here?" Jax asked, touching his pistol. "No," Elara decided. "There are too many of them. We must find the treasure first. If we have the golden anchor, maybe we can negotiate. Or maybe the island has traps that will stop them." She turned to the dark tunnel. Inside. Move. We have a race to finish. The 5 pirates ran into the darkness of the cave. Behind them, the stone door remained open, inviting their enemies to follow. The tunnel was pitch black. The light from the setting sun did not reach far inside. Ben held his torch high. The orange flames danced in the dark, casting long, moving shadows on the wet stone walls. The air here was cold and smelled of damp earth and old dust. It was the smell of a tomb. Keep moving. Elara urged her team. We need to get deep inside before Blackwood enters. They ran down the sloping stone floor. The tunnel was not natural. The walls were smooth, cut by human hands many years ago. Every few meters, there were carvings in the rock. They showed pictures of ships, sea monsters, and skulls. Look at this. Mara whispered, touching the wall as they ran. These are warnings. They tell a story of death. Do not read them. Jack said, just run. The path went down, deeper into the heart of the mountain. The sound of the ocean faded away. Now, the only sound was their heavy breathing and the crunch of their boots on the gravel. After 5 minutes of running, the narrow tunnel opened up into a larger space. It was a wide stone hallway. The ceiling was high, lost in the darkness. Suddenly, Griggs stopped. He grabbed Ben's arm to stop him too. Look. Griggs whispered. He pointed at the floor. In the middle of the hallway lay a skeleton. It was very old. The bones were yellow. But it was not lying peacefully. The bones were scattered, as if the person had been crushed. Above the skeleton, a large, heavy stone block hung from the ceiling on a rusty chain. A trap. Elara said softly. She walked closer, but she was very careful not to touch the floor tiles near the body. He stepped on the wrong stone, and the block fell. The wise woman was right. Mara said. The old corsairs protected their gold. Elara looked back toward the tunnel entrance. It was silent, but she knew that silence would not last. Blackwood and his army were on the beach. They would see the open door. They would light their torches. They would come. We have 2 enemies now. Elara said to her crew. Behind us, we have pirates with guns. In front of us, we have a mountain that wants to kill us. Which way do we go? Jax asked. Forward is the only way. Yes. Elara agreed. But we go slowly now. Ben, keep the light steady. Watch the floor. Watch the walls. If you see a loose stone or a wire, stop immediately. They moved forward again, but this time they walked. They stepped carefully. They tried to walk in the same footprints as Elara. The hallway was long and quiet. The tension was terrible. Every shadow looked like a monster. Every sound sounded like a trigger. At the end of the hallway, they saw a large archway. Beyond it, there was a faint, shimmering light. It was not firelight. It was something else. What is that? Asked Ben. The puzzle. Elara guessed. The final test. She gripped her sword tight. Stay close. We are entering the danger zone. They walked through the archway and stopped. The room in front of them was enormous. It was not dark like the tunnel. The walls were covered in strange, glowing blue moss. The soft light made the cave look magical, but also ghostly. In the center of the room, there was a deep, black hole. It was a canyon inside the mountain. It was too wide to jump across. The only way to the other side was a series of stone pillars rising from the darkness. The pillars were small, just big enough for 2 feet. It is a bridge, Jack said, looking down into the deep hole. But it is a dangerous one. Look at the tops of the stones. Mara said. She pointed. Each stone has a carving. Elara stepped closer to the edge. She saw the carvings clearly in the blue light. Some stones had a picture of a shark. Some had a bird. Others had a snake. It is a puzzle. Elara said. If we step on the wrong stone, it will probably break or trigger a trap. Which one is safe? Ben asked. He looked back at the dark tunnel behind them. He could hear distant voices. Blackwood is coming. We can hear them shouting. Elara took the map out of her pocket. She remembered Mira's translation. To open the door, you must feed the serpent. The serpent. Elara whispered. The snake is the key. We must only step on the stones with the snake picture. Are you sure? Jax asked. No. Elara admitted. But it is our only clue. She took a deep breath. She stepped onto the first stone. It had a carving of a coiled snake. She put her full weight on it. The stone held firm. It did not move. It works. She said. Follow me. Only step where I step. Elara jumped lightly to the next snake stone. Then the next. The crew followed her in a line. It was like a slow, terrifying dance. Suddenly, Ben slipped. He was nervous and moving too fast. His foot missed the snake stone and touched a stone with a bird on it. Immediately, the bird stone crumbled into dust. It fell into the black hole. Ben lost his balance. He waved his arms wildly, trying not to fall. Gotcha! Jax shouted. He grabbed the back of Ben's jacket. He pulled the young sailor back onto the safe pillar. Ben was shaking. Thank you, Jax. I slipped. Focus. Elara hissed. Do not look down. Look at the snakes. They continued across the chasm. Step by step. Pillar by pillar. Finally, Elara jumped onto the solid rock on the other side. She helped Mara, then Griggs, then Ben, and finally Jax. Just as Jax landed on the safe ground, a loud voice echoed from the tunnel entrance behind them. There they are. Elara turned. Across the deep hole, standing in the archway, was a group of men holding torches. It was Blackwood's crew. They saw the bridge of pillars. Shoot them! One of the pirates yelled. A musket fired. The bullet hit the wall next to Elara's head. Stone chips flew into her face. Run! Elara ordered. Into the next chamber. Go! Elara and her crew ran down the short corridor to escape the bullets. They turned a sharp corner and stopped abruptly. They gasped. The air left their lungs. They were standing in a massive cavern. It was the heart of the mountain. The ceiling was high and covered in glittering crystals that looked like stars. But the crystals were not the most beautiful thing in the room. The floor was covered in treasure. There were mountains of gold coins. There were wooden chests filled with red rubies, green emeralds, and blue sapphires. There were silver statues, golden cups, and swords with diamond handles. It was more wealth than a king possessed. It was the hoard of the old corsairs, gathered over 100 years. We are rich. Griggs whispered. His voice was shaking. He dropped his musket and ran to the nearest pile of gold. He fell to his knees. He picked up handfuls of coins and let them fall through his fingers. We are kings. We are gods. Ben and Mara stared at the gold with wide eyes. Even Jax looked amazed. He picked up a golden helmet and looked at it. Do not touch anything. Elara shouted. Her voice echoed in the large room. Remember the warning. The curse of greed. Griggs stopped. He looked at Elara, then at the gold. He dropped the coins. Elara walked to the center of the room. There, On a raised stone platform sat the object of their quest. It was not a pile of coins. It was a single, perfect object. The golden anchor. It was about 1 meter tall. It was not made of wood or iron. It was cast from solid, pure gold. It was heavy and smooth. Ancient symbols were carved into the metal. It shone with a light that seemed to come from inside the gold itself. "It is real," Jack said, walking up beside Elara. "I thought it was just a story." "It is beautiful," Elara said. She reached out and touched the cold metal. She felt a strange energy. This object was powerful. It was the symbol of the Pirate Queen. "We can take it," Griggs said, standing up. "We can take the anchor, and we can fill our pockets with diamonds. We will never work again." "We cannot carry everything," Mara said practically. "Gold is heavy. If we take too much, we will be too slow. And we have to run." As she spoke, a sound came from the entrance of the treasure room. It was the sound of boots on stone. It was the sound of men shouting. They crossed the bridge. Ben said. He looked terrified. They solved the puzzle. Elara looked at the golden anchor, then at the only door. There was no other way out. They were standing in a room full of gold. But it was a prison. "Get behind the gold piles," Elara ordered. "Prepare your weapons. We have the prize, but now we have to fight to keep it." Elara crouched behind a large wooden chest filled with silver cups. Beside her, Jax checked the powder in his pistol. His hands were steady, but his face was grim. Across the room, hiding behind a hill of gold coins, sat Mara, Ben, and Griggs. They held their weapons tight. The air in the cavern was cold, but sweat ran down their backs. The sound of heavy boots echoed loudly on the stone floor. The footsteps stopped at the entrance of the treasure chamber. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a gasp filled the room. "Look at it," a rough voice whispered. "It is a mountain of gold." Blackwood's men walked into the light. There were 12 of them. They looked wild and dangerous. Their clothes were wet from the sea spray, and their eyes were wide with greed. They forgot about Elara. They forgot about the fight. The sight of the treasure made them crazy. One pirate with a red bandana dropped his sword. He ran to a pile of rubies. He plunged his hands into the red stones. "It is mine." He laughed. "I am rich." Another man grabbed a handful of gold coins and stuffed them into his pockets until his trousers were heavy. They shouted and pushed each other, fighting over the best pieces. "Fools!" A sharp voice cut through the noise. Captain Blackwood walked into the room. He did not look at the gold coins on the floor. He did not look at the diamonds. He walked straight to the center of the room. He looked only at the stone platform. He looked at the golden anchor. He kicked the man with the red bandana. "Stand up," Blackwood ordered. "Stop playing with the pennies. We are here for the prize." The pirates stopped. They remembered their captain. They picked up their weapons, but their eyes still darted to the treasure. Blackwood looked around the room. He smiled a cruel, thin smile. "I know you are here, Elara," he called out. His voice bounced off the crystal ceiling. "I can smell your fear. Come out. Do not make my men dig you out." Elara stood up slowly. She walked out from behind the chest. She stood on the steps of the platform, right next to the golden anchor. She looked down at Blackwood. "I am not afraid of you, Blackwood," she said calmly. "You should be." Blackwood replied. He walked closer. "You led us through the reef. You opened the door. You solved the puzzle. You made it very easy for me. Thank you." "Jax," Mara, and the others stood up too. They aimed their weapons at Blackwood's men. But the enemy had more men. Blackwood's crew spread out. They stood in a semicircle, blocking the only exit. They aimed their muskets at Elara's team. There is nowhere to go, Blackwood said. He opened his arms. The door is behind me. The cliff is behind you. Give me the anchor, and I will let you live. I will leave you on this island with a few coins. You are a liar, Elara said. If I give you the anchor, you will kill us immediately. Blackwood laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. You are smart, Elara. Too smart. That is why you are dangerous. He drew his sword. It was a beautiful blade made of dark steel. So, we do this the old way. No cannons. No ships. Just steel. He pointed the tip of his sword at Elara's heart. Step down, Captain Vance. Let's see who deserves the crown. Elara walked down the stone steps of the platform. She stopped 3 meters away from Captain Blackwood. She pulled her sword from its sheath. The metal shone in the light of the torches. I accept your challenge, Elara said. Her voice was steady. The 2 crews stepped back. They lowered their muskets. They formed a large circle around their captains. This was a duel of honor. If anyone interfered, it would start a massacre. Jax wanted to step forward to protect Elara, but she looked at him and shook her head. This was her fight. Blackwood did not wait. He lunged forward with incredible speed. His heavy sword slashed through the air. Elara raised her blade just in time. The steel swords collided with a loud ringing sound. The force of the blow shook Elara's arm to her shoulder. Blackwood was much stronger than her. You are weak, Blackwood taunted. He swung again, aiming for her head. Elara ducked. The blade passed over her hat, cutting the feather. She jumped back to create distance. The floor was dangerous. The piles of gold coins were slippery like ice. Every time she stepped, the coins shifted under her boots. Blackwood smiled. He knew he had the advantage in strength. He attacked relentlessly. He swung from the left, then the right. Elara could only block and dodge. She was moving backward, toward a wall of rock. Is this the Pirate Queen? Blackwood laughed. He kicked a silver cup at her face. Elara moved her head, but the distraction worked. Blackwood stepped in close. He cut her left arm with the tip of his sword. Elara hissed in pain. Blood soaked her white shirt. But the pain woke her up. She stopped moving backward. She planted her feet firmly on the stone floor, avoiding the loose coins. She changed her strategy. She could not beat him with strength, so she used speed. When Blackwood swung his heavy sword again, Elara did not block. She spun to the side. She was a blur of motion. She slashed at his leg. Her sword cut through his pants and bit into his skin. Blackwood roared in anger. He turned around, his face red. You little rat. The fight became wild. They fought on top of the treasure. Coins flew into the air as they kicked them. They climbed over chests of diamonds. It was a dance of death in a room of riches. Elara was tired. Her breath came in short gasps. Her arm hurt. Blackwood was tired too, but he was driven by rage. He cornered Elara against a large statue of a golden lion. It ends now, Blackwood said. He raised his sword with both hands for a final, crushing blow. He was going to split her in two. Elara looked at the heavy sword. She looked at Blackwood's angry eyes. She knew she had only 1 second to live. She needed a miracle, or a very smart move. Blackwood brought his heavy sword down with terrifying power. He put all his weight behind the blow. He expected to cut Elara in half. But Elara was not there. At the very last second, she dropped to her knees. She slid forward on the slippery gold coins. She moved like a snake. Blackwood's sword missed her head by inches. It hit the solid gold paw of the lion statue. The soft metal of the statue caught the blade. The sword bit deep into the gold and stuck fast. Blackwood gasped. He pulled on the handle, trying to free his weapon. He was off balance. Elara did not waste the moment. She rolled to her feet behind him. She turned quickly. She kicked the back of Blackwood's knee, the same leg she cut earlier. Blackwood's leg collapsed. He fell to the stone floor with a heavy crash. Before he could move, Elara stepped forward. She pressed the sharp tip of her sword against his throat. "Do not move," Elara said. She was breathing hard, but her hand was rock steady. "It is over." Blackwood looked up at her. His face was covered in sweat and dirt. He looked at his stuck sword, then at the cold steel at his neck. He knew he was beaten. He slowly raised his empty hands. "I yield." Blackwood spat. The words tasted bitter in his mouth. The room went silent. The sound of fighting stopped. Blackwood's crew lowered their muskets. They looked at their invincible captain on his knees. The spell was broken. Their leader was defeated by a woman they called weak. Jax, Mara, and the others walked forward. They stood behind Elara, looking strong and proud. "Tie him up," Elara ordered Jax. Jax smiled. He took a rope from his belt and tied Blackwood's hands behind his back. He pulled the enemy captain to his feet roughly. Elara turned to Blackwood's crew. She pointed her sword at the door. "Your captain belongs to me now. But I am not a butcher. You have a choice. You can leave this island now, empty-handed, and live. Or you can fight us and die here in the dark." The pirates looked at each other. They looked at the mountains of gold. It was hard to leave the treasure. But they looked at Elara's fierce eyes and the disciplined line of her crew. They were leaderless and afraid. "We will go," one man said quietly. He dropped his stolen rubies onto the floor. "Go back to your ship," Elara commanded. "Sail away. If I see the obsidian on the horizon at sunrise, I will hunt you down." The enemy sailors turned and ran. They ran out of the treasure room, across the dangerous bridge, and back toward the beach. They left their captain behind. Elara sheathed her sword. She walked back to the platform. She picked up the heavy golden anchor with both hands. It was warm. It felt like victory. "We did it," she whispered. The cave was quiet again. The battle was over. The only sound was the clinking of gold coins. Elara stood on the platform holding the golden anchor. It was heavy, but she did not feel the weight. She felt light as a feather. "We cannot take everything," Elara told her crew. "If we fill the ship with all this gold, we will sink. Take what you can carry in your bags. Take the gems. They are light and valuable." The crew did not argue. They were happy. They filled their pockets and small sacks with diamonds, rubies, and gold coins. They knew they had enough wealth to live like kings for the rest of their lives. "What about him?" Jax asked, pointing at Captain Blackwood. Blackwood sat on the floor, his hands tied behind his back. He looked at the floor, angry and silent. "He comes with us," Elara said. "We will take him to Oak Haven. The governor will pay a good price for a pirate like Blackwood. It is the final part of our treasure." They began the long walk back. They crossed the dangerous bridge of pillars again. This time, it did not feel so scary. They walked through the dark tunnel and out into the cool night air. On the beach, the tide was going out. The mouth of the Serpent Rock was empty of water. The heavy stone door began to slide shut slowly behind them. They were just in time. "Look," Mara said, pointing to the sea. In the distance, the dark shape of the obsidian was sailing away. Blackwood's crew had abandoned their captain. They chose life over loyalty. Elara's crew loaded the longboat. They put the golden anchor in the center, wrapped in a blanket. They put the bags of jewels next to it. Then, they pushed Blackwood into the boat. They rowed back to the Silver Falcon. The moon was high and bright. The ocean was calm now, as if it respected their victory. When they climbed onto the deck of their ship, a cheer went up from the sailors who had stayed behind. They saw the gold. They saw the prisoner. They knew they had won. "Secure the prisoner in the brig," Elara ordered. "Put him in a separate cell. He does not speak to anyone." Jax took Blackwood away. Elara carried the golden anchor to her cabin. She placed it on her desk, right on top of the map that started the whole adventure. "We are going home," she whispered to the empty room. She went back on deck. "Raise the anchor," she shouted. "Set a course for the north." The crew worked with energy. They were tired, but it was a happy tired. They pulled the ropes and sang a song. The sails filled with the warm southern wind. The Silver Falcon turned its back on Skull Island. Elara stood at the wheel next to Mara. She looked back at the dark island one last time. It was disappearing into the night. "We did it, Captain," Mara said, smiling. "We really did it." "Yes," Elara replied. She looked at the stars. "Now, we go home. A new life is waiting for us." The journey back to Oakhaven took 2 weeks. The wind was kind, and the sea was calm. When the Silver Falcon finally entered the harbor, the sun was high in the sky. The ship looked battered. Its sails were patched, and its hull was scarred. But to the crew, it looked like a golden chariot. The people of Oakhaven stopped their work. They gathered on the docks. They whispered and pointed. They saw the golden figurehead on the bow. They saw the crew standing tall. Captain Elara Vance walked down the gangplank first. She wore a new coat made of blue velvet. Her sword hung at her side. Behind her, Jax led Captain Blackwood. The enemy captain was dirty and defeated. His head was down. Elara marched Blackwood straight to the governor's house. The governor was a fat man with a white wig. He looked at Blackwood with surprise. "You caught him?" the governor asked. "The wolf of the ocean. Here is your prisoner," Elara said calmly. "And here is your peace." The governor paid the bounty immediately. Blackwood was taken away to the deepest dungeon in the city. The ocean was safe from him forever. Then, the crew of the Silver Falcon gathered one last time on the deck. Elara opened the chests. She divided the treasure fairly. Every man and woman received enough gold to live like a king. "You are dismissed," Elara said softly. "You are free." There were tears and hugs. The crew said goodbye. They had changed. They were not just poor sailors anymore. They were legends. Jax bought the old tavern, the Rusty Anchor. He renovated it and renamed it the Golden Falcon. He spent his days serving cold ale and telling stories about the ghost ship and the giant waves. Old Tom opened a restaurant near the market. He cooked the finest fish soup in the world. He was never hungry again. Mara bought a large house on a hill. She built a library and filled it with maps. She spent her nights looking at the stars through a new, expensive telescope. And Kale, the traitor, was released from the brig. Elara gave him 1 silver coin. "Leave this town," she told him, "and never return." He walked away in shame and was never seen again. But what about Elara? Many people thought she would buy a palace. They thought she would become a noblewoman. But Elara was not made for land. She used her share of the gold to fix her ship. The Silver Falcon was repaired with the strongest oak and the finest white canvas. She kept the golden anchor in her cabin. It was not for spending. It was a symbol. It was proof that she conquered the impossible. Years passed. The story of Captain Elara Vance became a famous legend. Sailors in taverns across the world told her tale. They spoke of the woman who defeated the fog, the reef, and the black captain. They called her the Pirate Queen. On a windy morning, Elara stood on her quarterdeck. She had a new crew, young and hungry for adventure. She put her hands on the wheel. She looked at the endless blue horizon. The map was finished, but the ocean was infinite. "Raise the sails," Elara shouted, smiling at the wind. "Let's see what is out there." The Silver Falcon turned toward the open sea, ready for the next long story.